We are live.
Yeah, we are. Hello.
Yay.
Hello, everybody.
I'm pulling up.
Hello. Yeah, I got to pull up the chat too. So
Thought I already had it pulled up. How is everybody doing?
Yeah, how did everyone make it through the book?
I mean, it stole a few hours of my life, so
I'm curious like how many people will finish it, because I did have a couple people be like, "Do I DNF that?" Like,
yes, don't buy it. Return if you're wearing the window. Return it for your money.
Yeah, definitely would not buy.
I would say I didn't DNF it, but I skimmed it because a lot of it was like him being like, "Look at all the good ideas I have."
I flat out skipped 90% of that once, because in the first part of the book, I was like, okay, he's going to give us a few pages of really terrible ideas. I can stomach this. And then I realized it wasn't going to stop.
Yeah.
Then it was like, here's my very terrible opening. Here's my very,
yeah.
Bye.
Yeah, there was, I definitely, once he gave like the initial, all of his different examples that he was going to continue throughout the book, I was like just skimming to like, I didn't read any of that because I would never read those books. They sounded horrible. So why did I want to hear him sort of go through the process?
Yeah. The irony is like the kind of thriller, putting that in quotes, because we're going to talk about this man and what he thinks thriller is, but clearly the type that he does like, the exact subgenre of thrillers I hate. I do not read military, political, conspiracy thrillers. I don't like them.
Nope.
And I only occasionally enjoy a movie of that type, like a Born Identity type. But I'm not going to read that.
I felt like he was only really talking about those kinds of thrillers. Yeah.
And they're very out of vogue. Those aren't the ones that do well now. And at first I was like, maybe he published this in the 90s. 2010. No excuses. I have a list of thrillers he failed to mention that I'm mad about.
Yeah.
He just...
well, just in case anyone doesn't know what book we're talking about, we are talking about How to Write a Damn Good Thriller by James N. N is important here.
I made the mistake.
Yes,
Alexa set me straight right before this because I was wrong.
Yeah.
I googled it too because I was like,
I didn't know either, so I was just like, okay. So, but yeah, so this is, and as Alexa has said, this is the only traditionally published book on how to write a thriller.
Unfortunately,
for some reason, like.
So Alexa, look, I think Alexa, there's an opening for you to fill right now.
I guess.
Yes.
But like, I'll be honest, I looked and I didn't see any that were self-published that looked like what I was looking for either. Like people have asked me for craft resource advice. I was like, I'll try to find one. And maybe, I don't know. I'm just sad.
I think you need to write one.
Yeah.
I'm not that here's the thing. I'm not that experienced yet, but apparently I'm more experienced than James N. Frey and better read.
You could start working on it now as you're writing your thriller. But
there you go.
5 years. In the meantime, I'm just going to keep making videos. His book did give me video ideas where I was like, oh, look, you had one salient point that I still disagree with. We can talk about this.
Yeah.
He did have some points that he said that I was like, I've actually read the exact opposite of this in other craft books.
I wrote down some of his choice thoughts that I want to talk about. I'm ready.
And also, if anyone actually did like this book, please don't feel afraid to say that you did. Please explain yourself in the comments. Let us know. What did you... Because I did make some notes that we'll come to at some point about some positive aspects. But I mean, really on a fundamental level, I felt like he didn't understand what a thriller was and didn't really even define that. So if we want to kind of start off...
Well, really quick.
Yeah.
Reston Paperback said they are here for Alexa's saltiness.
That's all I have.
And Moon said Sue Grafton wrote a book on how to write a mystery, and her mysteries were pretty thrilling. I just got it and haven't read it yet. So that's good too.
Well, and we should talk generally. I think that there's definitely an issue with genre identification. Like, I say thriller, other people think mystery, and still yet there's suspense. So it could be semantics that are part of the problem.
Yeah, I agree. Because I think that there was just a lot of genre issues, because as I was reading it, I was like, wait, do I not know what a thriller is? Do I not know?
I felt gaslit.
Mysteries are? Yeah.
Wait, there's a hero on a quest?
Yeah.
And an outsized villain who you don't. He had a quote, I screenshotted it just to remember, that you don't always have to actually develop your villain. It's okay.
Oh my
I'm like,
God.
excuse me?
That is literally one of the things I wanted to talk about.
That's terrible advice.
Because especially later, he says you have to develop a background for your villain, or they're like, you know, not a good villain. I'm like, but you told us earlier people don't care about the villain's background.
So Lizelle DNF'd when he said Miss Congeniality was a thriller.
Yes, I wanted to ask Kevin about this in particular because as
one of my favorite movies.
One of Kevin's
great movie
was Miss Congeniality. So Kevin, would you have qualified that as a thriller?
No. I love that movie, but like,
yeah.
I mean, I guess there's like some mystery to it. Like,
it's a romantic comedy with a thrilling mystery element.
Yes, but I wouldn't call it a thriller.
That's the problem. James Frey literally thinks N. Frey thinks anything with a plot that is exciting is a thriller or
anything that has action in it. Like if
I made a meme, I was inspired. I had to.
Yeah.
It's on my community tab if anyone would like to see the meme I made for this book.
So funny.
But yeah, like, well, when he said Ernest Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea was a thriller, I thought, what? Have you read that book? Are you kidding me?
Have you read any book? Because I'm not convinced.
Oh no, he let us know every book he's ever read.
Well, but he also took care to mention when the movies were made.
Yes, he did.
I see you. I love movies too.
Yeah.
But I try to read in the genres I write in. So
yeah, he just I really questioned some of his ideas of thrillers, and a lot of them I felt like were actually a different genre that had some elements of thriller in them. Yeah. And I also think that if we're speaking really generally about genres, I think that what he was saying about thrillers doesn't always easily apply to mystery thrillers. So I was like, okay, you're talking about a very specific type of thriller. And I was thinking of specific thrillers I've read that I'm like, they don't have any of these things.
Especially the hero part. Like I was thinking of my own, the two I had in mind as I was reading are the one I wrote and Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. Because A, I love it. B, it was out when he wrote this and he ignored it because he has problems. And I was trying to think of Camille Pricker, and I was like, none of this fits. She's not an epic hero. But so much thriller fiction that's popular now, commercial thriller fiction, is the opposite of what he suggests. Because that's not what audiences want right now. We want anti-heroes. We want realistic kind of layman investigator characters who are messy and flawed.
Thank you. That was another thing he said, was that they couldn't be ordinary people. Like they had to be clever. Like it has to be a really smart, clever person. And he also said that all of your characters had to be exaggerations of a type. I was like,
that killed me.
Opposite of what we're supposed to do?
Honestly, it is the opposite of current good practical writing advice. Like
I think he was describing a very specific kind of commercial fiction from the 80s. Like this is what was, and he didn't know.
Very male-centric as well. Very
and the 90s. It carried into the 90s. It's basically every movie Harrison Ford was ever in based on a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's your dad or your granddad's thriller.
Yeah, I definitely started, like, they felt very male-centric. And also as, like, you know, all of us, you know, the three of us we write young adult. I was like, this doesn't really apply to young adult thrillers really at all.
Especially the epic villains. I was like, excuse me? This is not Bond.
Yeah, he was explaining like dastardly villains who are like, you know, it was, and what about his salty opinion that a villain can never be the main character, that it can never work? And I'm like, excuse me, you were incorrect.
I think, got burned. Like, somebody rejected that book that he wrote, and he was very angry about it.
Well, and he published this before Gone Girl came out, so...
Yeah.
You're wrong.
Yeah, his attitude, too, like, the tone, and this is the same problem I had with John Truby, is, and I think it speaks very much to like an old white male, unfortunately, what is just like very arrogant, very sort of condescending, very flippant. He thought he was funny, not funny at all. All of his attempts.
Show me the humor. Show me the
yeah,
humor.
like he said something about like, my agent made me promise that no banana fish were harmed in the writing of this book.
I did not understand that.
Like, what are you talking about? This is not funny. Like, it's funny because you think it's funny and it's not because what you said is funny. Like, I don't know.
I just want to say that, for instance, Lindsay said, the messier the main character, the more I love them. Which, according to him, is not the way to write a main character.
Maybe that's why he doesn't have a bestseller. Oh, sorry, I said it. That's not how contemporary thrillers work. And I legit made a list of all of the best-selling thrillers that had come out in the decade in which he wrote this book, just to point out that he is wrong. But almost all of them have messy protagonists, because the early aughts was the rise of that type of commercial thriller, which has now dominated the 2010s. Like, all of the best-selling titles, it's you know, the woman on the train, she's an alcoholic who can't be trusted, unreliable narrator. And for the most part, detective fiction thrillers and the military style ones he suggests are just totally out of vogue. They're not the thing. And so I think a writer today trying to write, unless he is also a white man in his 50s or 60s, is not going to be helped by a book like this. I write thrillers and I was like, this doesn't help. I don't recognize most of this. It doesn't help me. He tells you must outline. I forgot what he called it.
I wrote that down. He didn't call it an outline. He called it steps, which is basically
must be a beat sheet, yet he doesn't actually define or explain what should be in it.
He also said that you shouldn't do a 3-act structure, but then gave you a 5-act structure.
Which I disagreed with. I have notes on that.
John Cooper does the same thing. He says you can't use a 3-act structure, but then he proceeds to give you a structure on how to do it. So,
well, and that's actually, for writing advice, I think you should give structure, regardless of how a writer writes. If you're alleging to tell me how to write something, give me structure I can follow. He did not. I didn't, like, I've written books and I didn't quite understand some of what he was saying. I was like, is that true? Like, his murky explanation of essentially the entire middle was just stuff happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I think
they're on the defense. Okay.
I have found that, like, that's a big issue with a lot of craft books, is they don't know how to explain what to do with, like, the murky middle. They think they have an answer, but it's not really an answer. Like,
yeah, and Save the Cat has its own flaws. Save the Cat writes novels better, and I know that you guys agree.
Yes.
But at least it tries. And even though I didn't love Blake Snyder's book, the beat sheet is helpful because it's detailed, specific, and gives you something to latch onto.
Yeah, 100%. It was step sheets is what he called it. And I was like, you could call it an outline. It's an outline. Why are you trying to pretend like you're not telling people to outline? Because that's what you're doing. And that was what made me feel like he was really dated. I'm like, do you not know it's called an outline? Like,
no, I was like,
do you think you invented this?
So Lindsay said thumbs up the video for Alexis Spice. And
that's all I'm good at. So.
Amy T said, I was bored with the book and DNF'd it. So.
Yeah.
You missed nothing. Like, the most useful things. So I tried to write down some good things, which I know we're going to talk about. They're all from the first, like, third to half of the book. The few salient points that could have merit, theoretically, outside of the context of his book.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just basic craft stuff, though.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. Is I felt like the positives that I did mark down that I liked, that maybe he worded in a way I hadn't heard it like that before, were not unique to writing thrillers, and that's what I had a problem. I actually wrote in the book. That's why I get physical books. I like to write notes. I wrote in the book, how is this any different than your other book, How to Write a Damn Good Novel? Because I felt like a lot of it was just like very rudimentary advice on how to write a book, period.
I agree with that.
And he referenced that book a lot, too. Like, he wanted you to buy it. And I was like,
I'm already
hard pass.
You just gave it a different title. I'm already reading it.
And that's, sorry, I'm so sad.
Yeah. I just say I agree that. Sorry, I was just saying this. I think I agree that a lot of the good advice he gave was just general advice. The whole time I was reading it, I was like, this isn't about thrillers. This is just about writing in general. So
yeah.
Missed opportunity, because the thing is, like, I took a few of them and now I'm going to make videos because I'm like, oh, this is a great general point, but you have to do XYZ if you're writing a commercial thriller with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that Caitlin said he calls it a step-by-step guide and there are no steps. Agree.
Yeah.
Other than create an epic hero, create an epic villain with no depth, and then make a plot. That's.
I think honestly, the thing that really I got out of this the most, which is so small and simple that anyone could have said it to me, is he said when you're writing a thriller, you have to explain, like, if the reader's asking why doesn't the main character just leave, then you have a problem. And that's the only thing that really stood out to me in the entire book. I was like, oh,
I liked that.
That was like
exactly.
Like if they can leave the situation, why don't they? And that was the only thing that really stood out to me.
But I hated what he called it and how he described it. Unity of opposites is like word mash that makes no sense.
I wrote, what does that mean?
What does it mean?
Yeah. I didn't understand that at all. Yeah. Also, Lizelle mentioned that he kept using the actual phrase damn good in the text over and over again. That 100% annoyed me, and it went to what I was talking about with like his tone in the book, because what I felt like he was trying to do is he was trying to be like, hey, I'm cool. I'm, everyday man. Look, I'm making these little asides and I'm cussing or whatever. But then 90% of the book was like a lit review trying to prove to you that he knows what a thriller is, and it only did the opposite.
It didn't, but it didn't.
So I still don't understand.
It was like whole paragraphs. It's like, oh, it's like this movie and this movie and this movie and this movie, but he wasn't explicating any of them. He was just listing them.
Yeah, and what I was expecting or hoping for was that he would take actual contemporary thrillers that I think are thrillers, which was too much to hope for, and break them down. And that's what Save the Cat Writes a Novel did that was so good.
Yes.
Like, I expected it to be like, here's a breakdown of actually the only thriller he mentioned, but so briefly that it's like, why bother, was the Da Vinci Code. And I was impressed that he mentioned it at all, because that is on the list of books released in the early aughts that should be in a book like this. But then he doesn't say anything else. And I'm like, that's actually, regardless how you feel about the book and the writing, supreme example of a commercial thriller. And there's a lot in it that you can learn from. There's a reason he has a masterclass, but he's just like, this exists.
Yeah, I really expected for that to come back up. And
meanwhile, The Day of the Jackal exists.
Again, just like John Truby, it's like, why are you choosing these examples? They're so dated and old. And
what was John Truby's though? It was it was the one about the guy Dustin Hoffman dresses up as a woman on a soap opera.
Tootsie.
Tootsie.
Well, and also just like the few times he tried to be modern, what was that awful one that a movie I had never heard of? It was like the plane and the Native American woman and a plane crash, and it was allegedly a movie from 2004 I have never heard of. And he said it was like a perfect example of something, and I was like, is this you trying to be hip?
I looked up some of the movies and books he mentioned, and I couldn't even find them on Google.
Yeah. Do they exist?
What is this obscure movie you're talking about?
Yeah.
It's so strange. Oh, God.
I also feel like, and talking about like him mentioning all of these movies and books, and he came off very academic about it, but it also came out like, it makes it seem inaccessible, because if you're like reading this and you don't know these movies and you don't know the books, and he's talking like that, you feel like, okay, well, I can't understand. I mean, that's what was great about Save the Cat Writes a Novel is, first of all, it's more contemporary, but they picked really great examples that everyone, there was at least a few that you knew and understood, but his were they were either obscure, old things, or ones he made up, which were even worse.
Oh God, and offensive.
He made up they were just so like tone deaf, and just he's like, oh yeah, this is a great idea. Or like he had one about aliens that was so bad.
It was horrible. Oh my God.
I was like, I like books about aliens, I like sci-fi, I like space, but his was so bad. I was like, no.
But what I hate is the legions of aspiring writers, none of whom are here on YouTube watching this, so we're all safe, but who actually read this and read his other books and like are emulating him. And think about those people are querying, they're self-publishing. So when you see a really bad sci-fi / political / like military thriller, it's this guy's fault.
So Hila said the silver lining is that the videos Alexa will make after reading this book.
I'm so mad.
And Bunny said, when was this book published? It was 2010?
2010, not that long ago. Yeah. So I can just briefly, so the thrillers I looked up and double checked they were out when he wrote this, because I think this is important, that he failed to mention. So I already mentioned the Da Vinci Code, which he mentions once, but he doesn't mention Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo came out before that came out. Yeah. In the Woods by Tana French, which actually has investigator characters, which you think would be his thing. The Lovely Bones, really good example of upmarket. Upmarket, yeah. Shutter Island. Shutter Island is another really good one. Anything by Dennis Lehane, actually, he could have mentioned, and that would have worked. And Darkly Dreaming Dexter came out in 2004. These are all things I can think of, too, that have adaptations, and he loves to watch movies.
Wow, he loves to watch old movies.
Old movies. And that's the thing. I'm like, any of those would have been something that people could... I haven't read all of those, but I know enough about them to go, I understand that this is a thriller and this is popular.
So the sad thing is, like you just said, like you haven't read all of them, but you know that.
I know that.
He doesn't even know they exist. And this is like, he's an expert on this, which is like... someone asked who published this. It was St. Martin's Press published.
Yes, Macmillan, what did you do?
They're like, this will do well.
I think Lizelle makes a point. I actually thought this too. Like, he didn't really want to talk about women. And the ones that he did, they were like, okay, he talked about miscongeniality. And then he talked about The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, which, by the way, I do love that movie.
Great movie. That was one of the few where I was like, that's actually a thriller. Good job.
Yeah,
he briefly mentioned single white female as well.
He did mention that in like one sentence.
But it definitely was not his focus, and it definitely felt like he did not, because even like the kinds of thrillers that he really focused on were not like what would be considered like a female perspective or female centric or sort of like ways women sort of write, you know, nothing like that. And now we
dominate the genre.
Yeah.
Because even in things like in Miscongeniality, she's not seen as like a typical woman, because he even talks about she's a tomboy. So like when he was talking about women, it was like, oh, they're not regular women. They're tomboy women. They're basically men. Like James Frey, sit down.
Yeah, or the psycho in The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. The psycho woman. So
this man.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I said this to you before we started, but I just want to shout it. The fact that we got through this entire book and he did not once mention Agatha Christie proves that he is a grade A moron.
Mm-hmm.
I was expecting some, and then there were none stuff in here. Crooked House. There are a ton of hers I can name, and that aren't strictly mysteries. They really are thrillers, because honestly, I think she invented this genre. I personally feel the way that it is now. Like current thrillers are basically a resurgence of like Christie and Hitchcock. He does mention Hitchcock because he's a man. But like, I'm mad. It's fine. I'm fine. Yeah. He doesn't like women. It's okay.
Yeah, and I was just thinking too what you said, Alex, about how many people have actually read this and are using this. He is also, or at least he was when he wrote this, a creative writing instructor.
Oh, God.
So he teaches seminars across the country.
And if that doesn't prove to you why you don't need to go to college to write a book, then I don't know what does, because I had bad experiences in creative writing classes in college as well.
Or pay for seminars. A lot of the times the people teaching them are this dude.
Yeah, exactly. And they, that's a whole other video, but about going to school for creative writing. But so I just kept, because he kept like, and that's how he was like talking, like, and he was like, when I teach a class, I do this. And when I teach a class, and I thought, oh, please.
Oh, yeah, the writing a journal trick, which isn't bad, but I'm still kind of like, congratulations for reinventing the wheel.
Yeah. I will say that was one of the only like takeaways for me. Not that I'd never heard that before, but I'm struggling with like a particular like aspect in my book. And when you mentioned that, you should write from like a journal entry, I was like, oh, maybe I should try that. Maybe that would help me with what I'm doing. So I was like, okay, that, that reminded me of that. But yeah, he wasn't coming up with anything like, super interesting.
Moon said that was an excellent point, because Crooked House is the Christie that she recommends to people who haven't read her before.
It's so good.
I've never read an Agatha Christie, and now I kind of want to read Crooked House.
They are very stylistically not like you have to get used to it. They're very different from how books are written now, but the core stories are amazing. Also, Crooked Houses has a very good adaptation. I want to say it was BBC, so you can watch it.
My best friend, she's not really a reader. She's like in med school. She's like into science, but she is obsessed with Agatha Christie. Has read every single one of her books. So like
they're brilliant.
Read a single book by her.
Yeah.
So,
well, if you'd like to read the modern Agatha Christie, I recommend Ruth Ware. She's my favorite writer.
I have a couple books of hers on my list, actually.
She basically takes Christie and or Hitchcock and or like she did one that was basically Rebecca and one that was The Turn of the Screw, and she modernizes them as commercial thrillers. Like she mines those Christie tropes.
Okay, so she wrote The Turn of the Key, right?
Yes, that's The Turn of the Screw, but modern. Yeah,
I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I like the ending.
It's not my favorite Ruth Ware book. I won't turn this into a Ruth Ware video, but I have so many feelings, and depending on your taste, I can usually recommend The Perfect Ware.
We'll talk about this later because
that's also from her Gothic period, which is different from her high concept commercial thrillers. They feel different. So her Gothic period, it was 2 books.
We'll have a Ruth Ware conversation afterwards.
And Riley Sager, as long as I'm just throwing out good names of good writers.
Yeah, you want good thrillers. Here you go.
Yeah. And Gillian Flynn, obviously. That's the thing. Like, someone used to write a thriller how-to using real modern examples.
Enter Alexa.
No, I really don't think I'm that talented, but I appreciate you. I'll make YouTube videos. I'm fine with it.
Apparently, you don't have to be that talented.
Apparently, I don't have to be that talented. That is true. I don't even have to know what a thriller is, apparently.
Yeah. So.
Give me a book deal.
Throw your hat in the ring.
You already have a leg up on him. So
yeah. I do want to kind of just say as like a little note to everyone that in one of his examples he was talking about like a man who I think there was 2 different examples that brought up like Native Americans, and I just want to say that whenever you're talking about Native American people, don't ever refer to them as Geronimo-like.
That was a choice.
Don't ever say they're getting back to their warrior, inner warrior. And also when he said that like the villain married a Native American woman and worked for the casino, you should always be tribally specific when you're talking about Native people. Like the only time you usually like use Native American is if you're talking about like several tribes, holistically, or you don't like know, but you should always try to be tribally specific when you're talking about them. It was such an easy thing he could have done. So I just felt like, dude, like
he doesn't care.
Why are white? Just as a side note, why are all white men so obsessed with like Native American or Indian tropes? Because Stephen King uses them all the time too. He brings them up all the time. He puts them in his books all the time, and I'm just like, bro, why? Why are you so obsessed?
I really think it's that they grew up on Westerns, like cowboy Westerns. Like, I think that you can tell when I'm going to generalize, but you can tell when an old white man loved Westerns as a child. It's just very clear.
Oh yeah.
He was a big John Wayne fan. It's telegraphed at you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I just found him a little insufferable too, because in one part he's like, I fell into a funk. I just couldn't figure it out. I did my usual tricks. I interviewed the character. I brainstormed. I went out on my sailboat, Spirit of Arnaldo, and let the wind and waves massage my imagination. Get the fuck out of here.
I didn't catch him talking about being on his sailboat.
I think get out of here with that stupid. Oh god.
Yeah, very sort of like pretentious, sort of know-it-all attitude.
Well, apparently he's made a lot of money off these books. So
scary.
Yeah, I don't know. He did. There was a couple of, maybe we could talk about a couple of things that were kind of okay.
Let's be fair. Let's have a moment to talk about.
Yeah. So I did like that he did say that a friend of his mentioned that 20% of her writing is spent on the first 15 to 20 pages. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, I don't know about the numbers of that, like 20% of your time on that. But I do feel like something to really emphasize is he's talking about how important the beginning is.
Yes.
On so many levels, no matter where you're at in the writing, like trenches. Because like if you're trying to get an agent, the beginning of your book matters. If you're trying to get an editor to buy the book, the beginning is really important. If you're trying to get someone to want to read your book, the beginning has to hook people in. And so I kind of like, even though I don't know like about that number of 20% particular, the fact that he tried to put a number on that helped to emphasize to people like you should be devoting a lot of your time to setting up. And so, I mean, that I thought was a plus that he said. So.
I do agree generally, and I will say in his, so I took screenshots so that I could write them in my notes. His 5-act structure for a mystery and 5-act structure for a thriller, which I don't unilaterally agree with, except, and also it's still too vague, but his act 1 for a thriller is a gripping opening. I'm like, too vague, but completely true. Your opening is pretty critical for a thriller, and I did like his concept, which isn't his concept, the germination of idea. I will agree that that is critical for a high concept thriller. If your core idea, the what you start with, isn't working, it's not going to work. But where I disagree with him is that his idea of a germination of an idea is a full ass high concept. Whereas for me, at least, that's not how I start with thrillers. Like, I think few of us start with, here's my whole ass high concept plot. But I liked the idea of only challenging yourself to come up with the core of an idea. I like that. I actually like the vagary there. I think it's less intimidating for authors. So like, I like his term, but not his definition. Because like the Ivies, all I had was college admissions and murder. That's all I started with. That's, I mean, I guess that is a high concept, but it's not an elevator pitch. So like, I think it's a lot of pressure to have the writer start off with the high concept pitch. I think that's too much to ask personally.
And that also reminded me that he said someone had their, not outline, whatever he called it, was like 200 and some pages long.
Yes.
I was like,
that's a zero draft.
Yeah, exactly.
Bunny said, though, Laura, what you said about like spending so much time on the opening, Bunny said, isn't that just true of all fiction though?
100%. 100%.
Which can actually also be a pitfall generally, because very often writers, like the partial's so polished and then it falls apart. So you mustn't forget to work on the rest of it later.
Definitely. I honestly don't know if any of the things that I thought were good from the book were thriller specific.
I think
they were more just like general writing advice that I liked that he said. I don't know.
I did like the 7 pillars of a damn good thriller. I have some things like I made notes because I agree and disagree with it, but I do think it's the one thing he did in this book that actually gave writers something to latch onto. It's one of the only lists in the book, and it's like this is all technically true, even if I would tweak all of them.
I think
like the unity of opposites thing. I that is dumb the way it's phrased, but the idea is correct. If the reader can figure out how the investigator character could easily walk away, you have a plot hole. That is a logic hole, and that is really, I think that's important for readers to understand. That's why so often it's the tropes we see in thrillers. They're implicated in the crime. It's someone really close to them who died. There's personal menace. They're being threatened. Like, you have to have a reason for them to stay put. I did like that. And the ticking clock, again, he didn't invent this, but it's a good reminder. It is pretty important to have some kind of timing framework that adds urgency.
I would say, Laura and I have talked a lot about this, that I think that's true. It helps a lot in a lot of fiction.
Fantasy as well.
Just having some kind of like, or like even in a contemporary, like this is all leading to the prom. This is all leading to graduation. So that way the reader has some kind of idea of where this is going.
Well, that's essentially establishing a part of your stakes.
So, 100%.
I did note that I liked the 7 pillars. I just wish he would have done more with that throughout the book.
He just never mentions any of it again.
Because I think Caitlin had said in the comments earlier that the subtitle is a step-by-step guide, but it's anything but a step-by-step guide. This is not a step-by-step guide. I was waiting for the steps, you know? You know, when you tell me you're going to give me step-by-step, I expect it to some extent to be like sort of a plug-in. Like, first you do this, then
I expect
you
a
do
worksheet.
Exactly. So it's just kind of like, I don't even know how to talk about the 7 pillars other than just how he listed them, because he just listed them without really In the unity of opposites. What does he mean by unity of opposites? Because I really didn't feel like I understood what he was getting at with that.
Well, his phrasing is wrong. I put a quote in my outline. He said, the hero can't run away from the challenge. That's what it boils down to, but I still don't understand why he calls it the unity of opposites.
That's where I was getting confused. So I was
like... It is confusing. I'm like, okay?
I just want to say that I like how salty people are being in chat, because Rest in Paperback said, how was this book published? And Bunny said, too easily, apparently.
White men in publishing.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yep.
Well, and specifically, I believe he started publishing these books in the 90s, so he got his foothold in the advice market early, and apparently How to Write a Damn Good Novel sold really well, and that gave him cachet to continue spewing bullshit. So,
yeah.
If you look at his bibliography, he hasn't written a novel since the 80s.
So he's just writing these books now?
Yeah, he hasn't written fiction and published fiction. And I looked at his bibliography and I could tell he used to write Soviet thrillers. Like that was his bread and butter. And then the USSR collapsed. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I will say like he mentions this several times, this exact phrasing that he says, to create a damn good thriller, you need to create a clever hero and send him or her on an urgent, impossible mission.
I hated that.
To foil evil for the benefit of others.
Again, that's an epic adventure fiction story, not a thriller.
So specific.
When he went into the Odyssey, I was like, seriously, are we doing this? Homer was not writing thrillers. Can you sit down?
He's like, your book could be the next Odyssey. And I was like, oh.
Could it?
Yeah. So I just felt like there were so many parts of that are just wrong, I felt like. And like I could think of examples that don't do any of those things, like at all.
Yeah. He's obsessed with epic fiction, but that's not what thrillers are really now at all.
Yeah, he's talking way more specific. And like to think of the villain as evil, I feel like is so outdated. Like
it's a Bond villain.
Yes. It's
what she brings up. Goldmember, whatever his name is.
He analyzes a lot of Bond films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just share something that made me laugh?
Sure.
When he was talking about the movies and he called Casino Royale and Quantum Solace, he put them under the thrills a minute section. And I was like, you've got to be joking. Have you seen those movies? They are slow as shit. They were criticized for being slow, and they are. Oh, sorry. I had a good time as much as I hated it.
Yeah. I got some unintentional laughs out of it.
Right? Yeah. So I do have one thing that I actually agreed with and thought was useful, shockingly. And this is what I will probably make a video on, because it's so true, and it's just a plotting thing. I liked when he talked about the plot behind the plot. It's one of the only things he wrote about that I thought was useful for people writing a thriller, where you basically need to figure out as the author the entire plot behind what your main character goes through, because unless you know that, you can't really write your book. I agree with that completely, and I think that's a good technique for beginners, especially even pantsers, because you need to know how all the background machinations are working so that you can basically do your sleight of hand as the author. I actually think that's one of the hardest parts of writing a thriller, pulling off that dance.
Yeah, I would
use one of his own books as an example, and that's garbage. So
I do feel like in general that it would be way more difficult to pants a thriller. I feel like there's just there's too I don't want to use formulaic, but there's too many things that have to happen and be set up in order for it to work, and I just don't know how you could pants that.
I think that if you pants it, you'd have to go in and do a lot of work.
A lot of revision.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, and I've talked about it in videos, you can basically fall, hi, here's my cat. You can fall in the middle, though. I personally can and do plants thrillers, but the plot part of the plantsing is base structure, and the base structure is super important. I know who the bad guy is, and I know what's going on. I know the plot behind the plot, essentially, which is why I found that to be the one salient point that could actually help people who want to write thrillers.
Yeah.
Because that's the pre-work that I personally definitely have to do. I have to know who the bad guy is and what their motives are to write the book. But I don't have to know everything else before I start, personally.
Yeah.
But I understand, like, understanding that helps me figure stuff out. So.
Yeah, definitely. Because it just feels like, I mean, I am probably more of like a planter as well. Like I do outline, but not detailed outlines. It's more like, oh, they go to this place, you know, and then like, and I know like the kind of like general what needs to happen in that scene to get me to the next one. But then I kind of, you know, new things come along as I write those. But I feel like a thriller, that's what's a little bit more intimidating to me to write a thriller, is that it seems like for me, I would need to do a lot more figuring things out beforehand, or I'm afraid of like being in there and being like, oh, God, I have so much stuff to fix. Where am I in this? So
it is scary.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah. I mean,
revision is intense though. I won't lie. Yeah. You make one change and it's a lot.
That's what I've heard. Because I'm friends with Caleb Roehrig, and which I always pronounce his last name wrong, but he said like you change one little thing at the beginning and then it has this whole chain of reactions that you have to fix later.
Yep. For my edit on the Ivies, my editor had one fantastic suggestion, which it's bonkers. Technically not a lot changed, but my main character changed. It changed her entire arc. So I just had to go through, like, she had different pieces. I changed the pieces of information she had, which changed the kind of person she was, which changed her observations in every single scene. So I was just tweaking, and it was so much work. I almost had a mental breakdown. It was a lot. I thought I broke my book. It's better now. But like, it's a tiny change. It's like, well, what if my main character didn't know this? Whoops. It's a lot.
It just seems so. I really want to write a thriller, but after reading this book and hearing these things, I'm like, maybe I don't.
That's what makes me sad. I feel like James Frey is going to discourage people.
Yeah. God, well, I hope we didn't add to that by having, like, you know, hopefully people will not go to this book now because of this, and
like,
it will not.
You're definitely better off reading Save the Cat. Like, I 100% feel that you're better off. I got more from Save the Cat than this for sure.
Yeah.
In terms of Save the Cat is pretty universal in terms of the beats. You just have to tweak them slightly for a thriller. So.
And I think that that's what's good about Save the Cat Writes a Novel, is she actually does talk about genre-specific ways that you can tweak them at the end of the book. So I think that that's also helpful. And I know that there's like, I don't think she calls any of them thrillers, but she does have some that kind of address that. But I just...
Sorry.
No,
I know I'm not on the Save the Cat episode. I thought it was a bold choice to do The Woman on the Train. I know she did it because so many people had written it, but structurally, that's a very complicated thriller.
I actually skipped over the explanation of that one because I want to read it.
Yeah, well, that's good. But I honestly, if anyone has read Save the Cat Writes a Novel and was looking for how to write a thriller from that, she almost picked the worst example for a beginner. Honestly, I won't tackle that level of unreliable narrator. I don't think I can handle it at this point. My thrillers are very linear, and there's a difference between a linear thriller and non. Like, anytime you do multi-POV or unreliable narrators, you are 501 in your thriller, and I wouldn't start there personally. I think it's a lot.
Yeah.
Just have someone dies and one person investigates. You can handle that. I promise.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, though, something that I've noticed, like when you talk about thrillers on your channel, Alexa, that if you're going, especially if you're going into a genre that you haven't written before, I think it's really important to not just read a bunch in the genre, but to actually study them, like how they do
things. Yeah.
And I think that that's what's good about the examples in Save the Cat Writes a Novel, is that she does explicate them. She breaks them down. She shows how these things are working. And I think that to an extent, you kind of have to do that yourself with the things that you're reading. I know, like, for me, I really struggle with transitions between scenes if time has gone by. Like, you know, like if it's been like 2 weeks later, how to do that. So
that's hard.
I specifically took out books that are in my genre, in contemporary YA, where I know they're doing that, and I look, how are they doing that? How are they demonstrating? And I have them like written down so I can look at how people are doing that. And I think that's really important as writers, that we because we're readers, but we also should be reading as writers and doing that very differently. Because I do notice that, like, I feel like you talk about that a lot. Like, you kind of break down how things are working when you review a lot of the thrillers that you read.
Well, because I started reading like that. Because when I started my what I call my thriller binge, which I started when I started writing one, also it's when I decided to actively use NetGalley. I love NetGalley. I get so many free books. Because the thing about thrillers is I read them so fast, I can't afford to read all the ones I want. But I was reading knowing I wanted to write one. And exactly, it's like, well, why do I feel rising suspense in this part of the novel? The percentages is a huge one. And there's something he said in his 5-act structure that I don't agree with how he defined it, but I think he's referring to what I call the 70% twist, because I read on Kindle. If a book doesn't have a substantial, like, big thing at 70%, something's wrong. And actually, same thing. If something hasn't happened, a micro twist by 30%, your book's broken. Like, just pacing and structure wise, there are rules to a good thriller that you can kind of follow.
Yeah, that was something he didn't agree with, because he was talking about how script writing is really specific on the 120 pages and certain things have to happen. And he says in here that he thinks that that's wrong because you're trying to shove things in to fit a timeline. But I think he's being too literal.
Even when people talk about Save the Cat, they're too literal. Yeah. I mean, in fairness, Blake Snyder was being literal, but we're not screenwriters. Luckily, Jessica Brody's a little more nice about it, and Save the Cat writes a novel. But, like, it's not the exact page number. I actually like Kindle percentages because it is a ballpark. Specifically, there should be an initial twisty thing in a thriller between 20 to 30%. It's sometimes the inciting incident, but it's more often the break into two. Yeah. Middle is actually less important in a thriller. You do need something to happen around 50%, but 70% is actually the important one. And I will sometimes
I'm going to take notes.
I will sometimes literally be on my Kindle. I'll go, it's 70%. It's about to happen. And when I read, like, the big best-selling ones, it is like clockwork. Though actually sometimes 70% is usually the break into 3 is what I call it. I'm kind of borrowing from Blake Snyder, but it doesn't. It's like the thing that propels the main character into the climax, whatever that twist point is, whether it's a real twist or a false twist. Like, the character misunderstands the twist and unfortunately, like, literally walks into the den of the killer. That's used a lot trope wise. But then often, like, the actual climax twist is 80 to 90%. I can usually tell when a book is going to have a rushed ending if it's too close to 90% as well, almost like clockwork. But sometimes authors surprised me. So, like, Ruth Ware, I read her new book and I got to 70% and I was like, it's too early to reveal the killer. Like, this must be a false twist. And it wasn't. Like, that's not spoiling. She did an extended act, like the act 3, which you can do with a villain. So you just have to make choices about. Anyway, I digress. There are different ways to write a thriller, but, like, he didn't actually talk about any of this. No. There are beats you have to hit, or thriller readers will be pissed off.
That is what I wanted in this book. Because that is what I felt like I needed. Because that's like, if I want to write a thriller, I need those things. Like, what are definite things that have to happen in certain places of the book? And I kept waiting for that, and I didn't get that at all.
I watch Books and Lala, and she talks a lot about, like, the things that you can expect in, like, every thriller and, like, why she loves them. And I'm like, so I was like, wait,
I love watching her videos. She and I have fairly similar taste in thrillers too. So I will say the one thing he said in his 5-act structure that I agreed with, other than he's not wrong about a gripping opening. I just think that's useless to someone who's trying to learn how to write. But I liked his act 5. And this is something I've always called it the denouement because I'm fancy. A thriller will always fail for me if it doesn't have an ending with a extended resolution. I expect to touch base with major characters. Sometimes there's a final twist, but, like, I will always dock a star on a book if it has what I call abrupt ending syndrome, which is there's the climax, you catch the killer, and the book just ends. I hate that.
Yeah.
Because it's not satisfying, and that's when you leave your reader with questions. So that I did agree with him that there should be. It's interesting that he calls it a 5th act because sometimes it's literally just a chapter. I don't know if I would call that an act, but it's something that I think you have to have in a good thriller.
Was he called them phases, or was that something else he was talking about?
No, that was he shared
phases.
His act structure for mysteries and act structure for thrillers, and I screenshotted both of them and wrote them down. And honestly, his act structure for mysteries, you could combine it with his act structure for thrillers. It still wouldn't be as accurate as I'd like, but kind of works.
Yeah. Because I think Stephanie had asked, and if you could talk on this, Alexa, like she's asking, because you said someone dies and one person investigates, like how would you distinguish then mystery and thriller?
It's just genre trappings, honestly. And what's fascinating about the modern high concept thriller is it rose out of mystery. Mysteries more often in at least traditional publishing, they're cozy.
Yes.
Cozy's a big one. There's the detective mystery thing, and that's more like, it's kind of classic Agatha Christie. Whereas, and then there were none, while a classic Agatha Christie is not a detective novel, Miss Marple is mystery. Poirot is mystery.
Yeah.
I find most often thriller, like an actual thriller, it's definitely fast paced, but it's, I think more often they do have like the layman investigator, like not a cop. It's not a procedural. Though not all procedurals are mysteries. Honestly, it's a very murky thing, and it kind of has to do with the readership more than anything.
I read most thrillers have some element of mystery.
They do.
To them. Yeah.
Also, there's a thin line in mystery between thriller and suspense. There's a thin line in thriller between thriller and suspense. And I've said it sometimes in videos where, like, I do the mystery and thriller section in NetGalley. I just request anything that looks interesting. And sometimes I'll read one, I'm like, this is not a thriller. It's literary suspense, which is just a different kind of read. And I like to warn readers. I'm like, I still enjoyed it because it was interesting to me. But if you want fast-paced, literary suspense is not fast-paced. It's creepy and it has tone, but it's not a thriller.
The way I kind of think about thrillers is like how fast I feel like I need to get through the story. You know, like whether the pacing is slow or fast, if I'm like, oh my God, I need to know like really quickly, like literally think about it, it's thrilling. Like you really need to kind of get through it. Whereas, you know, mysteries are not always like that. Sometimes they're, you know, like you said, cozy, quiet, sort of.
Yeah.
I've never watched the show, but isn't like Murder, She Wrote, isn't that mystery stuff?
I love Murder, She Wrote. It's horrifically 80s. Yeah, those are mysteries. Those are not.
When you say I always think of that with like mystery, but I would not think that that's thrilling.
And every once in a blue moon, the show did have thriller tone in an episode. Some of them, like where it was really, I think it's about stakes and conflict. So the episodes of Murder, She Wrote that felt more thrillery are the ones where like Jessica was a suspect in a murder.
Yeah.
And it was like really tightening the screws. But also so 80s. Like Murder, She Wrote is a cozy mystery. 100% it's cozy mystery. It's so cheesy. Oh my God, I love it. I'm actually writing a Murder, She Wrote inspired thriller. So,
oh yeah?
Yeah.
I always wanted to watch that show too, because when you go to Universal Studios, you go on the tour, you see the little town.
Calico.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, I want to watch this.
Every season is going to be on Peacock, which will be launching soon. I'm actually beta testing Peacock, so I've been watching Murder, She Wrote because it's an NBC show. So
right. Yeah, I think it seems like then that maybe a difference between mystery and thriller are the stakes.
I think it's
the character.
Yeah, and style too. I just feel mystery will never go away, but it's not really the en vogue commercial genre right now. That's 100% high concept commercial thrillers.
Yeah.
And it's just style. And again, James Frey doesn't read, so how would he know?
Yeah.
Someone asked, Stephanie asked, Women's Murder Club by Patterson are thrillers, right? I'm not sure if you guys know.
Patterson almost exclusively writes thrillers, I'm pretty sure. Actually, that's another, you know what? No matter how you feel about James Patterson, it's real weird that he did not come up in this book. That just occurred to me. Kiss the Girls is a classic.
I agree.
And it has a movie. So.
Well, we know he doesn't have good taste. So.
Right? Because that's how Patterson became James Patterson, writing thrillers. And actually, they're one of my exceptions. It has a cop character, but I never minded because they feel like high stakes, high concept thrillers in a way that I read. I did read several of them back in the day. before I discovered women authors.
Yeah.
Side note, but have you read any Harlan Coben?
No, I know I should.
He has like a spin-off YA series about like the main guy's nephew, who those are all mysteries, and he like tried to break into YA, and they were okay. But I was just curious.
I've been meaning to read P.D. James, because that's Nora Roberts, another person he did not mention in this book that he should have, because Nora/P.D. James has written many best-selling thrillers, but they're actually more like mystery thrillers, because it's the cop character. But I've just heard she's just an incredible tropey writer, so I've been meaning to read those. I did buy one, just haven't read it yet.
I will never. I just don't understand. There's so many big names that he decided not to bring up. And it's so baffling to me. So baffling.
Yeah, and that's what makes it, I think, essentially inaccessible to most people, other than being just kind of like wrong on a lot of levels.
JD Robb. I said P.D. James. Thank you. I'm good at words. P.D. James, I think, is another writer. See, I'm an idiot. It's fine. Anyway, I had a thought. What was I saying before? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But I have to admit that like I am sort of newer into getting into thrillers, and so I honestly like the ones that really kind of got me into like in terms of YA is Karen McManus, her sort of thrillers, and I actually avoided her first book, the one that I can't remember the names of them, but
One of Us is Lying.
That one. I always mess up what it is. I avoided it for a while because I'm like, and someone spoiled the end for me, so I didn't.
I went into that having been spoiled as well.
And I still ended up liking it though.
Yeah, it makes it less enjoyable, but still good. But I said it in my review. I was only spoiled for one of the twists, so I was actually ultimately happy I didn't know the other one because I could still enjoy it.
Yeah. But that's kind of what I was thinking about a lot too when I was reading this book. So I was like, this does not. And her books are wildly successful, and they don't do any of these things, you know.
Lindsay said, "Alexa, you need to read The One," which I agree, so good. One they're making it into a Netflix TV show. Laura, you know what?
I don't remember the author though.
By whom?
It is by.
She's like, Laura, make Alexa read The One. I've been telling everyone.
It's by John Mars. It's very good.
Okay.
It's also, the audiobook's really good because it's a full cast, and I love a good full cast in an audiobook. So
you actually never listened to an audiobook. So
I did not until I was living in LA and had to commute an hour to one of the schools I taught at, and then I just started listening to audiobooks. And so now, I work now. I don't teach right now, and I work in an office job, so I can listen to audiobooks all day long while I work. So that's why, because then I can sort of read. But I avoided audiobooks for so long because I was like, I won't be able to pay attention. I won't like it as much. But no,
I like them so much. I love
audiobooks
so much more if they have a full cast, though. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it is hard, especially if it's like a romance. You don't want a woman trying to do a husky voice to the guy in the dialogue. It does not make you really feel in the moment.
Lizelle asked if I ended up liking it. I did end up liking it because my favorite storyline ended up the way I wanted it to.
In the one, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
I'll look it up.
Is that a thriller or a mystery? I don't know that I would.
Yeah, some of the storylines are thriller. There's the one character that's.
Oh yeah, there is a serial killer as one of the characters. So
I do like serial killers, like in fiction, not in real life.
Yeah, because it's different perspective. It's different perspectives, and one of them is a serial killer. So I guess that's.
Yeah, and so the thing is about the one is I totally saw a lot of the twists coming, but I still enjoyed it in the end. Caitlin said she's also listening to the audiobook. The audiobook is very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love a good full cast.
Yeah, actually, we can just talk about thrillers at this point. I personally feel as a thriller reader, I'm okay if I guess things if it's expertly crafted. Yeah. Because I still enjoy the read if you do a good job. Mm-hmm. And my favorite is when I guess one thing but not the other. That's when I'm like, good job. Yeah. I feel smart, but not too smart. It's great.
I would say that actually happened when I read the one, because there was like a major twist, and I was like, oh, I saw that coming, but the character's like, but I also did this, and I was like, oh shit, I did not see that coming.
Good writers are able to do that sleight of hand. So yeah.
I drive my husband nuts when we watch thriller type movies, because the whole time I'm saying out loud, like guessing what I think it is. And then I'll maybe have guessed like 50 things and one of them comes true. And I'm like, see, I knew it. I totally called it. And he was like, you called 49 other things that were wrong. So you don't know anything.
Right.
This might be a good question for Alexa, because you've read a lot. Bunny said, do you have any recommendations for top 3 thrillers you would recommend learning from?
YA or adult?
Ooh, good distinction.
It also depends on the kind of thriller that you're writing. So I try to tailor recommendations. So we can, going back to Karen, my thing with her books is that she's a master craftician. If like she lines up her dominoes incredibly well. And I don't know if you would so much learn by reading them, but if you want to know YA that I think does that incredibly well, Karen's books are good. The problem is that I've read so many. I like To Keep a Secret. I guessed every single twist in that book, but I've read a million books, so it's fine. But like craft wise, they're really, really good. In terms, my favorite YA thrillers that take adult tropes. If you want to know if you're an adult thriller fan and you want the darkness and the twistiness of adult tropes made appropriate for YA, it's Kara Thomas for me. And specifically, I recommend The Darkest Corners. I think that's her strongest one. A lot of people have only read The Cheerleaders, which I don't think is as strong in terms of trope translation is what I call it. But The Darkest Corners is a perfect example of a small town secrets book, which is one of my favorite adult thriller tropes.
I love small town secrets.
Love it. So hard to pull off in YA because teenagers don't have dark pasts usually. And I think it did a really good job with it. And it had some really good twists at the end. I highly recommend that one specifically. Little Monsters is also good, but it's a different kind. But Kara Thomas does rip from the headlines very, very well. If you like that kind of true crimey thriller stuff. Honestly, the YA field is very limited, which is partly why I wrote a thriller. There's not a ton that I think are like immaculately crafted. I mostly read adult, to be honest, because there's just a volume in adult. And in adult, and this can help you with YA too, read Ruth Ware or Riley Sager. Those are my current recs. And then Gillian Flynn's a genius.
If I ever get a thriller published, I'm going to ask you not to read it. You're like, Kevin, this was
good. YA is improving because they've bought so many, but like a lot of them aren't out yet. So I'm waiting, including mine, not to like fluff myself up, but meaning they aggressively acquired after Karen blew up.
I think Karen.
It's taken a while because of publishing timelines to get those books to market. And there's still not a volume that I'm happy with. Because I read them like candy. I just like go through them. And there's way more adult to do that with.
Yeah.
Caitlin said, Alexa, what are your top good adult small town secret thrillers?
Sharp Objects, Gillian Flynn. Ooh,
did you watch the adaptation of it?
Yes, I vastly prefer the book, even though the show is good. There's something like, so I'm guessing you watched it. See, I can't spoil it.
I haven't.
Read the book. I recommend the book. Gillian Flynn is so good at deep character psychology in a way that you can do in a movie, but I don't think it's as good personally. That's personal preference though.
And Bunny also is curious which Ruth Ware you would suggest if they like Gothic.
So it's funny because I know that you didn't love it. The turn of the key.
I like the ending. It is very Gothic.
Because the thing with The Turn of the Key is it is her more sophisticated of her two Gothic thrillers. I would agree with you that it's not my favorite. It's more polished than The Death of Mrs. Westaway. However, if you like YA, read The Death of Mrs. Westaway instead or first, because it is, I swear to God, my pet theory. I think I'm right. I think it's the first book she wrote, but the fourth book that was published.
I think that happens a lot.
It reads like an earlier novel, still a really good novel, but it's the only Ruth Ware novel with a 19-year-old protagonist, and it makes no sense that she's that young. It reads like a crossover novel, and it's basically Crooked House meets Rebecca, so it has that kind of vibe. Yeah, it's got like an inheritance and a creepy house and a Mrs. Danvers. It's got all that stuff.
I will say what I really liked about Turn of the Key, which I don't want to give too much away because if you haven't read it, but the garden, the specific kind of garden it was, I was like,
that was
this
cool.
is weird and creepy. I like this.
She's very good at setting, and her, what I call a classic Ruth Ware anxious heroine, they're always anxious, so it kind of pulls you into that setting.
I will say Turn of the Key had a lot of good twists at the end. That I was like,
it did, yeah. Yeah. The only Ruth Ware I don't recommend, by the way, is The Lying Game. I genuinely hated it. I think it's craft-wise craft-wise, I don't think it's very good. I think it's her bad book. I think she rushed writing it after The Woman in Cabin 10 was a runaway bestseller, and I don't think it was properly edited. And that's why I think The Death of Mrs. Westaway is an earlier trunk novel. I think it was easier to polish it off something that was already written and get it published. So that's my personal thought on that.
Lizelle said to read all Gillian Flynn.
They're all good, and there's only 3.
She said even her short story is good.
Yeah.
I did want to ask.
Really quick. Sorry. I the other day I just watched Ready or Not. That was a good thriller.
I love that movie.
Super campy.
It's so good.
Over the top. That was a good thriller. I was like, the whole time I was like, ooh, what's going to happen?
Also, a perfect example of something you can do in a movie that's not going to land the same in a book.
No, 100% would not. Especially the ending. I was like,
what is that about? I don't know if I know what that is.
She marries into the family, and then like they're like have to play a game, and they're
on
like
your wedding night.
Yeah, and they're like trying to. The trailer is like they're trying to kill her, and she has to survive.
Yeah, because she gets hide and seek, and it's implicated that the family is like evil. It's so fun.
I think I remember seeing the preview for that. Yeah,
so and actually, good. It's so campy.
If you'd like my spicy opinions, I'm one of the only humans who did not like Knives Out.
I haven't seen it.
Well, I watched it again because it's free on Prime. Because I wanted to my gut reaction was I did not like the movie, and everyone loved it. I was like, I don't think I'm wrong. I'm convinced the problem with Knives Out is that it shouldn't be a movie. I think it should be a book.
I didn't know it was on Prime.
I just saw that it was free on Prime.
Just got added,
and I told my
husband, I do recommend watching it. But it's a deconstruct. As a movie, it works as a deconstruction of a thriller. And I think it thinks it's too clever, which is a problem that I have. By the way, I don't hate Rian Johnson's Star Wars movie. I just didn't like Knives Out.
Me either.
Because it was fanfic. It was delightful. But I actually think if you took the concept of Knives Out and did it as a non-traditional structure thriller, I think it'd be a much more satisfying read than it is a movie for me. Because it definitely would have to be a weird structure, but I think it would be better as a book. So,
do you guys remember where Ready or Not is at? Is it on HBO?
HBO.
It's on HBO Max.
Yeah.
Oh, it's on HBO Max. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll have to look at that too.
Knives Out was a ride. And that's the thing. I watched it again. It only works the first time you see it.
Yeah, Lindsay said that she thought that Knives Out had pacing problems.
It does. And it has pacing problems because it has character problems because of the lens through which it is told. And that's why I think it should have been a book. In a book, you can abruptly change your main character and point of view in the middle of a book, and it can work. That is very hard to do in a movie. And I think one of the only ones that pulled off that kind of structural twist was Gone Girl. So, in my humble opinion.
I have actually never seen Gone Girl because I had it spoiled for me.
Oh, yeah.
And
you haven't read the book?
No, but my husband hasn't. He doesn't know anything about it because he's kind of like one of those guys who doesn't know like what people are talking about in pop culture. So I want to watch it because I want to watch him watch it because I know he's gonna be like. So yeah. I just haven't.
It's so hard. I want to say I recommend the book because I do, except if you're spoiled, it's going to be less fun.
Yeah.
But reading, I still remember what it felt like to read Gone Girl, and it was a revelation. It was amazing. And the movie's very good, but I consider them separate entities.
Yeah.
So, but the movie's excellent.
I actually don't mind when things are spoiled for me. It just makes me not. I know Kevin is obsessed with not having things spoiled.
Well, so you know nothing about Sharp Objects, correct?
I actually have no idea what it's even about.
Read it. Okay, you can actually have a pure reading experience. Don't see the show first. And it's my favorite Gillian Flynn, personally. Gone Girl's a masterclass, but Sharp Objects is a personal favorite.
Well, that's something that she did as well, because she had it spoiled, so she said she just read Sharp Objects.
Yeah, because it's basically like, it is small town secrets. She's a journalist. She's forced to go home because girls are being murdered in her hometown. She's been estranged from her family for however many years. She's a functional alcoholic who cuts herself. She's got a lot. And that's the thing. It's that perfect, like, imperfect heroine who is both keeping things from the reader, but also doesn't have the context to fully understand things, but regardless is your primary investigator. It's beautifully done.
I'm excited to read it, because it's
creepy as hell too. I love it.
I didn't even know what it was about, so excited.
Yeah, well, I gave you like the tip of the iceberg on purpose. I don't want you to know anything else.
See, I don't really mind spoilers, but it does make me not in a hurry to then watch or read them. I have to just like be in the mood. So that's the only reason why I hadn't. But I used to be really into like soap operas when I was younger, and there was like websites where they would give you spoilers for the next week, and I would read them religiously. Like, I didn't care that things were getting spoiled. I still enjoy watching the things happen. So I don't really mind that. I just, it does prevent me from like wanting to do it. I know what's gonna happen.
I just don't like them in thrillers, because like I feel like the whole
point.
It's like twisted and like the twists and being like surprised and the excitement. And like if that's spoiled, then like the ride isn't as fun. You know where it's going.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just to like touch on the craft, and again, things James Frey did not even cover in his stupid book.
Oh, is that what we're talking about?
That's why it's so important as right? It's so important as the author, and this is the hardest part. And I'm still not like my biggest fear on my book coming out is that I screwed up and then I didn't do it right. And I might not have, I don't know. It is the sleight of hand. What ruins a good thriller is when it's too obvious what is going on and then the reader doesn't enjoy the ride. You're basically crafting a ride, and it is really, really, really hard. And again, James Frey didn't even talk about it. So that's where the plot behind the plot is so interesting to me, because he's completely correct. You have to know that so that you can do your sleight of hand. And it's a juggle between knowing exactly what is actually happening, but hiding it. And both having your clues, but not being too obvious. And so like the intense revision I did, I had some people guess too many for my liking. And then I did my revision, and it basically improved my guess ratio. And like, sometimes that's what it takes. You have to do this. You have to really get into your thriller. So like, I say don't stress too much about planting a thriller, because even if you're immaculate, you're going to have to do revisions. Like, that's the good thing.
If we're talking about like what he mentioned too, I know this is something that you had said to me previously that you had a problem with, and I wanted to kind of talk about is POV.
I hate him. I hate him so much. He's wrong.
He said 99% either do first person or third person past. And I just feel like, is that right?
He's wrong.
Okay.
He is right about the kind of books he reads, probably.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It's another phenomenon of the evolution of writing and books. Third person used to be the POV, and largely with the rise of YA, that is simply no longer true. And specifically between YA, thriller, and romance, first person present tense has had a huge rise. A ton of thrillers are in first person present tense.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but I know I haven't read that many, so I was like, I don't know, is he right about that? Because I would think that a lot of them would be in present tense.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I'm trying to... All my books are on my Kindle. Like, I'm trying to remember which ones are. Because the thing about a good thriller is you shouldn't remember what they're in if they do their job right. But I remember which thrillers I read are in third person because it's so unusual now. It's also really hard to do. Because the whole thing with first person is it's the immediacy, and most thriller readers want that immediacy.
I also kind of have a theory, and I'm going to make broad generalizations here, so just bear with me on that. But I feel like the fact that women are writing more of these books directly correlates with how many more are first person present, because I think he actually said, I just remembered this, something that like pissed me off, because he said he doesn't like first person present because it's the poor me syndrome that are too introspective, which is such a male sort of perspective.
He said that about first person generally, he didn't even say present. He just meant in general. I also screenshotted when he was bitching about that.
Yeah. And
his whole thing about how writers overestimate the quality of their writing. I was like, okay. And in fairness, I actually think first is harder to pull off than third in a lot of ways, because people get complacent about how easy it is. I actually vaguely agree with him, but also screw you.
I feel like men tend, and this is again a big generalization, but I think a lot of like straight white males tend not to write very introspectively. They're not, they're not going to talk about feelings or thoughts or whatever.
Yep.
So,
that's the cornerstone of modern commercial thrillers. Yeah. And someone earlier mentioned something I completely agree with Riley Sager. He's one of the only male thriller writers who writes impeccable female POV main characters. I will read Riley Sager because of that. Otherwise, I either don't pick up or I have DNF'd thrillers by men. Apologies for that kind of essentialism, but it's just true. I vastly prefer thrillers by women.
I prefer most books by women, to be honest.
Yeah.
But Riley Sager, he did purposely pick a pen name that was slightly gender neutral, so that that was an intentional thing that he did. And it's smart because of kind of preconceived notions. I'm checking some of the thrillers on my Kindle to see. One by One by Ruth Ware is first person present tense for sure, which leads me to believe she probably normally writes in first person present tense. This one that I read, The Weekend Away by Sarah Alderson, first person present tense. I'm just checking. Keep going.
Okay. Go ahead, Gav. You go.
No, you go ahead. No. You go.
No,
I was just gonna say that like the thriller idea I have is in first person past. Now I'm just like, I don't know. This chat has made me so conflicted.
I wanted to say that I'm going to put Lindsay up here on blast. Lindsay has a hot take on sharp objects here.
I saw that.
That she thinks that is a poorly constructed killer.
No spoilers, though.
I don't know whether or not I agree. I'd have to reread the book. My pure reading experience of it was that I thought it was bloody brilliant. But I read it years ago. So I will refrain from stating a definitive opinion. I will say I don't think the show did a very good job with it, because it is hard to pull off.
And we banned Lindsay from chat.
But yeah, so I feel like it was also, I mean, maybe he was just sort of being facetious, but obviously he wasn't being very literal. But to say 99%, that was like, bro, really? Like, no.
He's wrong.
Like, I knew that. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's just like, I don't know. I felt like everything, especially as someone who's newer to the genre and someone who is interested, who has an idea, would, like to write something. I didn't feel like this helped me at all. Yeah. Like, I don't feel like it really, like I said, did not provide steps. It did not provide any sort of structure. Things that he said, I feel like, are actually the opposite. Most of what was helpful in terms of like general writing advice was stuff I've heard before. He maybe just phrased it a little differently that like maybe clicked with me, but he wasn't anything profound in that sort of way. So
and it's just, if you want to survive in the current thriller market, nothing he said is applicable, basically.
And I think that that's hard too, because I understand that whenever you're using examples, they are not always going to stand the test of time. I mean, that's how a lot of books are. But I feel like some of the general stuff should be able to last a little bit longer.
Agatha Christie stands the test of time, and he ignored her. So and then There Were None is still relevant to modern thrillers. Not the writing style; it really is different. It's third person, and it reads like a play in some places. Like, she does this thing where she's like character named Colon and then has their dialogue. It's very strange. But like the thrust of the plot and the characters and the twists, I'd say that's the backbone of modern commercial thrillers. Unreliable narrators, the layman investigator character. The POV character is a former governess who is very out of her depth and doesn't understand where she is or why, but she's also keeping secrets from the reader. It's classic modern commercial thrillers. And I'd say most women commercial modern thriller writers are heavily inspired by Agatha Christie. I definitely am in a lot of ways. So
yeah, I've never read Agatha Christie, so
like I said, I mostly have seen the adaptations, but I did read And Then There Were None, and it really took getting used to. The writing style is very 1920s. So.
I definitely, though, like I said earlier, like before I write any sort of like genre, I always like, some people are really weird and they won't read the genre while they're writing, but I'm the opposite. That's all I read when I'm writing, because I got to be like in that zone.
I have to be in the headspace. It helps me tonally.
Yeah, so I definitely think when the time comes, if I ever want to work on that thriller, that's what
I'll give you Rex.
Definitely.
And honestly, that was the hardest part for me writing a YA one. There wasn't enough YA to read.
Yeah.
That's why I went so heavily into the adult ones. So
here's what I'll say in terms of Agatha Christie. The episode of Drunk History about her is very good. And
she really did just disappear.
Yeah, her life,
and
her actual
no
life
one knows why.
Her life is a thriller.
It really was. You should watch
it. It's a thriller mystery. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I meant. Well, it's kind of, I mean, it was good. You should watch it.
She was fascinating, yeah. There's actually a movie on Netflix that has like their own theory about her disappearance. It's like a cute little fictional one. I forget what it's called, but I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix. And it's the idea that that missing time she was solving a murder.
Oh my God.
Like this cute little period movie. I forget what it was called, but I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix.
Her Drunk History episode is so funny. I love it.
So this is interesting. Caitlin in the chat said that she's writing a thriller in first person present, but she has another POV that's in second person present. And I'm curious how often like second person is used. Like, have you seen that used much in thrillers before, Alexa? The second person POV?
Not a ton. And the most famous one I haven't actually read, or the current famous one, which is You by Carolyn Kepnes.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think especially if it's a limited POV, it can be very, very, very effective. Like very specific POV. It's usually used for killers.
Yeah.
If there's a distance in it that's really purposeful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that when second person is used well, it's a very effective, but it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult to write as well as read if it's not done well.
Yeah. Agatha Christie and the Truth of Murder. It's like a cute alternate history. It's just like a little movie. Very lighthearted.
I'll check it out.
I liked it. Yeah. And my favorite And Then There Were None to watch is the BBC And Then There Were None. It was done a few years ago. It's got Charles Dance in it. It was really good.
I love Charles Dance.
And I want to say it's now on PBS Masterpiece, but it could be Prime. It was really good. And then Crooked House is definitely on Prime.
Charles Dance is Tywin Lannister on Game of Thrones.
Yes. And he's the judge in And Then There Were None. Very good casting.
So
he plays scary. This like ominous character.
He's a very scary human being.
Let's see. Yeah. Google's not telling me where it's streaming, but I know it's streaming somewhere. Prime has a ton of Agatha Christie content, so.
I'll look on Prime.
The You book, that is what the show is based on.
Yes,
right?
And it was an Alloy book, so it was packaged that way.
Yeah.
Just some, fancy information for you. Alloy books are fascinating because they're often sold as TV shows first. So.
I know that that's obviously off topic, but since we just mentioned it, I feel like a lot of people actually don't know what packagers are.
No, a lot of them don't. And then they're shocked when I tell them.
Yeah, or like writing IP, and things like that. I think that's a whole facet of the industry that people don't really know. There have been books that I found out came from packagers because, some of the packagers will have the author go to events as though they are the author. And so when I found out that that it was from a packager, I was shocked.
Yeah.
So
actually, some of the most famous YA thriller type things are packaged.
That does not surprise me. Yeah.
Like the classic ones, like Pretty Little Liars, like those are all packaged.
Yeah.
Sarah Shepard, almost her entire career. Though actually, I did read her adult debut, which was not packaged. I liked it, but for the most part, she does packaged work. So.
Yeah. So
and then You was packaged. That was another big one. So.
Yeah. So I'm just curious too, like if a lot of because I know the people I've spoken to a lot of them don't know what that is or
yeah. My joke is that my thriller, I basically set out to write an Alloy book, but all mine. It's basically an Alloy premise, but mine.
Well, because I know too with again, it's slightly off topic, but the publishing paid me hashtag. A lot of people were also listing what they were being paid for IP work, and a lot of.
I guess those tweets are gone because I'm pretty sure in your contract you're not allowed to say.
Yeah, I did see several of those where they were saying what they got paid for IP, and I don't think that they were like listing which
IP
one.
just pays less. Period. I have a whole video on IP, and the thing with IP is that it's flat versus scale, and scale is like royalties.
Yeah.
Whenever possible, don't accept flat. Unless you're doing big IP, like if you're doing Disney or Star Wars, you often don't have a choice. But the only way you can write those anyway is if you have a really good agent. So they'll protect you. But other kinds of IP, like more packaged stuff, they actually love authors who don't have agents because they can take advantage of them.
Yes.
But it's also a double-edged sword because since they pay so little, a lot of authors don't want to have agents because they have to give them a split of their very small fee. Mm-hmm. So I spoke to an Alloy author who purposefully does not have an agent because she makes way more money without one. And she's not paid flat. So she's actually doing well with a percentage fee.
Yeah.
And that's not normal. Most packaged authors get flat, not a percentage. But if you can get a percentage, because most packagers sell their books for 6 figures. So
yeah,
there's a whole world out there.
Yeah, it's definitely you have like one idea about like traditional publishing, and then when you start getting into it, it's very different than what you realize.
I will say packaged thrillers, since we're talking about thrillers, are pretty uncommon. But they do happen, especially now that like anytime something's in vogue in publishing, packagers get into it. So I think that's where you came from the adult thriller boom. And I do know of one packaged YA thriller that's coming out next year, I think. I only know because my friend worked on it. But for the most part, but that said, I bet we'll see more since YA thrillers are selling so well.
Yeah.
Lindsay said it's off topic, but she is excited for Alexa's video on Whisper Network.
Oh, yeah. I had a whole outline, but then everything happened, and I have to edit it for good. Things have shifted slightly. Because that was, I think, Lindsay, that was your request. So I listened. I do read my comments. Well, I respond to them, too. That makes it sound like I don't. Like, you can't tell that I read my comments. I do. Some people don't, but I do. I got time.
Lizelle said, I've heard that package authors will also accept the flat rate in order to try and break out with a book that has a lot of support with plans to sell their own books after.
Yep. Yeah. I have friends who have done that. And honestly, sometimes it really pays off and sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes it really pays off.
I was curious, like, how often that actually works.
I know of at least 2 cases where authors who didn't break out on previous books went to IP, and it's currently working out very, very well for them. They finally have a name that they didn't have before. I'm being vague on purpose. And then I have a different friend who wasn't able to sell their debut, and they did IP. And like no regrets. Like she also got well paid for the IP, which helps.
Yeah.
So, but she's got a very good agent, which helps. So.
Yeah. Stacy asked, do agents help you find IP deals?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you want the good ones, you have to have not just an agent, but the best agents, like being perfectly frank. Like, so my agency gets some of the pitches. Like, I know Glasstown had communicated with them, Alloy, Disney. And my agent's great, and I love my agency. I'm not interested in IP, so they never come to me. I know my agency gets them, is what I mean. They've definitely, Disney definitely sent a bunch to my agency. But the agencies I hear who get like it's the big ones you're thinking of, they get the best IP opportunities, and they get them first. So that's why you see certain clients from certain agencies get the cushiest IP jobs, just being honest. But it depends on what we're just talking about IP now. It's cool. Yeah. We should just chat more often. This would be fun. It depends on the IP too. Some IPs, they only want established names. You're not even going to audition unless you're a bestseller. Like if they want Holly Black, you're not going to be able to audition as an unknown. Other IP franchises want unknowns, often either because they're not going to pay well or because they don't need a name to sell those books. Those are the opportunities you're most likely to be able to audition for if you have an agent. It's the packagers. So you can audition for Alloy without an agent, and you can audition for, well, I mean, are we going to talk about Glasstown? We probably shouldn't.
I was actually going to ask if you would plan to do a video talking about.
I'm not sure that I can, because I have so many personal connections to it that I don't know if I'm at liberty to say half the things I know. I can check with those friends.
Yeah.
I've known about Glasstown for a very long time.
I have
and then Cake is one I can recommend. It's run by women of color. It's good.
One of my agent siblings got an IP through, I can't say who, but through Alloy. And again, she doesn't have a lot of books out. She's not really well known, but she got it because it's like one of those ones, like you said, like they didn't need a big name. But man, they've been dragging that out. I mean, I can't really say specifics, but it's supposed to, like, it's been like 3 years and it still hasn't.
That happens sometimes. I have a friend who got a very good like IP contract. Like it's a good property. Crickets. Don't even know what's happening with it. It's been a while. That happens sometimes, but you get paid either way. That's a good thing. Yeah. So, so IP is pretty fascinating. And yes, Scavenge the Stars is a Glasstown title. Yes.
Yeah.
I actually got an arc of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thriller I'm thinking of is also Glasstown, because my friend came up with that thriller plot. She actually gave me excellent advice on how to write a thriller. So, she's the person who told me to plot it backwards. So credit to her.
I definitely think too, just because we're kind of talking about some things that came out on Twitter, that if you are, especially if you're considering traditional publishing, you should be paying attention to Twitter to know what's kind of going on, because every day is a wild ride on Twitter.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's kind of, to be honest, it's kind of a toxic environment in a lot of ways. But if you just kind of creep on it and just to see what's going on, you find out a lot of things that I don't think you would generally know about.
And also, more than ever, I know I'm a broken record. I've said it so often, but I'll just repeat it. The recent stuff that we've seen just proves more than ever, you must get the best possible advocate for your work.
Yeah.
Do not settle for a bad agent. Bad agents get you into bad deals.
Yeah.
To be frank. Good agents support you.
Yeah.
And they back you when there's something crazy is happening. And also, if you look at publishing paid me, there's a difference between what some agents get and some other agents get. And
although I did see a lot of people deleting their tweets after they posted them.
They did.
But everyone took screenshots.
I remember everything.
Took screenshots, so that stuff is there. Okay.
And also you can do the internet time hop thing.
Yeah.
It'll still be there.
Well, this is the tea. We're just burying this at the end of this craft video.
We have nothing else to talk about with that book, to be honest.
Because it's bad. And I really do. I after I read it, I went back to Amazon. I was like, did I miss a self-published book I could have looked at instead? Which is my own bias, which, just to be clear, is based on I've had a previous bad experience with a nonfiction self-published book that has made me wary of nonfiction that is self-published, because there's no fact checking. But it didn't help me here. This book was garbage.
Here's the thing. I feel bad. I feel bad because I feel like since we started the book club, I haven't really liked any of the books. But
I don't like craft books personally.
I don't know. This book in particular, I think, is probably when
Garbage.
I think I disliked it the most out of any one we've read. So
100%.
Nowhere to go but up.
Right?
100%. This was the worst. I liked the last one that we did, which was Wired for Story. I didn't necessarily think it was like brand new information, but a lot of this with craft is just the way people explain it, like what metaphors they use or terminology.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff in Wired for Story just clicked for me differently on how to do some of that stuff. So that's kind of what I look for when I like to do the craft, is I'm just looking for like they're explaining it. I mean, because that's how it is with when you're learning anything. I mean, it's just like how you like some teachers and not others. It's all in the way they present the information. So that's what I like for craft books, is that maybe they're going to present it in a way that I hadn't thought of before.
My problem, just to get like broader about this, the reason I won't read Lisa Cron is I heard her on a podcast and she made it very clear she hates outliners and thinks they're all liars who don't exist. So that's why I won't read her craft books, because I know they're not for me. It was 88 Cups of Tea. She was being salty about pantsers. She was basically saying like it's not like it can't be real. Real writers are outliners. It was something like that, and I was just like, bye.
We did kind of talk about that in the chat, because I think, at least the way I sort of interpreted that, is that I don't think you can ever just pants a book without doing some sort of outline at some point in the process, where you kind of go back through and see what you're doing. So I don't know, maybe that's just how I interpreted it. Like, I don't think that everyone outlines before they write. But I think that if you don't outline before you write, at some point you try to figure out a structure of what you did and where it's going. So I don't know. I see what you're saying, but I
fall in the middle, but I don't like process evangelists, and so many craft books are process evangelizing.
I 100% agree with that. They deal in absolutes, which I don't like.
I don't like.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like, I feel like a lot of these books are like, this is how you have to do it, and I was like, there's no way you have to do something. And they're like, if you do it this way, you're wrong. It's like, okay, but I can think of lots of books that did do it this way that are now successful, and I don't like you said, like those absolutes. Like I don't know.
Well, and especially because they're dealing in absolutes, and admittedly, craft books are mostly for writers trying to figure out how to write books. The beginner type craft books, they're 201 craft books. They focus on drafting. And I'm like, the missing piece, anytime you're talking about non-outlining processes, editing.
Yeah.
So much happens in editing. It doesn't even matter how you draft if you know how to edit.
I agree.
And I think there's just so much nuance, which is why authortube exists. We can talk about these things. So for me, most craft books are never going to be what I want them to be or need them to be. But occasionally I still like Save the Cat isn't, well, the novel one. I have feelings about Blake Schneider's opinions on movies that I'm still salty about. But for the most part, not too prescriptive. So
yeah, I've never read his original. I just
if you want to shit yourself, I recommend it. He has a thing for bad movies. He also wrote some very bad movies, and he has some hot takes about some of my favorite movies of all time. He does not like Christopher Nolan, so we cannot be friends.
Oh, interesting.
He thinks Memento is bad, and I'm like, sit down. He also doesn't like Spider-Man 2 for a reason that I think is stupid. So,
Lindsay said that we should make you read Anatomy of Story with us, but you read Anatomy of Story, didn't you?
I tried to read Anatomy of Story. I didn't get very far because it didn't like his tone.
Yeah,
but I have it. I bought it. That counts.
Yeah,
I prefer to watch lessons from the screenplay, which often quotes John Truby, but in digestive pieces that aren't as pedantic that I can enjoy.
Yes, that's exactly.
He's the reason I bought it. And then I tried to read it, and I was like, oh, no.
Caitlin said she loves the tone of Jane Cleland and Libby Hawker's craft book, since they were like, this is how I do it, so maybe you will like it too, not pushy at all.
That's the way I prefer it.
Yeah,
it's different to talk about the way you do it and then to instead say, this is how you have to do it.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see how other writers do it and like, oh, maybe this will work for you. But like to say, like, this is how you have to do it if you want it to work, I don't like
that. Was what drove me nuts about Truby. He was like, he literally says, if you don't do it this way, it will not be a success. And I'm like,
well, I mean, Frey did that a little too, not about process, but he was like, if your book is missing this bullshit formula, it won't be damn good. I'm like,
yeah.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I did not like that at all. But I think you're right. I think you make a good point that a lot of craft books focus on the drafting and not revision. And revision is the hardest part. Like that's where you really need, and that's where I'm at. That's what I'm looking for is help with the revision process, you know.
But it's also kind of like who's generating the majority of sales for craft books? Newbie writers. And that's the market. And they're trying to make money off of that market. And like Macmillan taking advantage of the poor suckers like us, I guess, who bought this book. Yeah. Well, honestly, it comes up on authortube too. Like, I like doing 201 or 301 craft advice videos, although it's hilarious because I got dragged kicking and screaming into making craft videos, period. I'm really bad about organizing my brain to talk about things because my brain doesn't work that way, which is why I'm a plantser. But the ones people watch are the 101. That's people want 101. How do I do this at the end of the day? So I personally enjoy the 201, 301 ones because they actually often teach me. Because when I'm forced to actually think about how the heck do I do that, or how does someone else do that? Yeah, I learn my craft has improved since I started making authortube videos, and I think it's the only reason my craft has improved. Other than reading,
I was say I have all your writing thriller ones. Like I have them in a playlist, so as soon as I start writing that book, I can watch them all again. So
I'm about to make more because this did give me ideas where I was like I said, there were bits and pieces, and I've been meaning to, and I just haven't made them. I've been meaning to make more in-depth analytical videos about specific books. I just haven't done it yet because making my brain do that hurts. But I know I should.
I'm excited because I kind of want to work on this thriller next, but I don't know if
thrillers were fun. I had so much fun. I almost also broke my brain, but it was fun. The end result is so worth it if you can pull it off, and I hope I pulled it off. Like the feedback I've gotten post revision, I can tell it's better. I fixed it. It's better. It's good. Yeah, fixed it. It's
what would you say is the average length for a YA thriller? Would you say it's normal YA length?
It's in between normal contemporary length and speculative length because it's but it can't be too long because of pacing. It's this dance. I somehow got away. I think mine ended up 84,000 words, which is a little long. I will not lie. But it's because there's a social thriller aspect that needed some more context. Because of all the college admission stuff, I had to have extra stuff. But I drafted it and we sold it at 74K.
Because this thriller idea I have takes place in 3 days, and I just don't know. I don't want it to seem too if you did, honestly, I always say NaNoWriMo is not a novel. It's not long enough to be novel unless you write certain genres. I think you could feasibly do 50K dirty draft, and as long as you push it a little closer to 60, especially if it's a fast-paced thriller, nothing wrong with that. Shorter's better, usually. I've seen a few thrillers that were long, and I'm like, well, what are you even doing with your life? Yeah. This is no longer thrilling.
Too long. Usually when they're too long, the second act drags. So, and I'm trying to think, I'm looking at the ones on my shelf. Actually, Good Girl's Guide to Murder looks pretty long. Hold on. I read it on Kindle first, but then I bought the book.
As soon as
but it works.
As soon as you said earlier the 30% and the 70% twist, I'm like, these things pop in my head. I was like, these could happen in my book. So
no, it's true though. Follow it.
Now I have ideas, so this chat helped me.
When I'm CPing or mentoring a thriller, I pay attention to the percentages. I can also usually tell from a synopsis when it's not going to work, when the pacing's off. I can tell. I'm like, yeah, it's not working.
I'm not going to lie. I'm really bad at synopsis.
They're not my favorite, but they do help me.
They help me too.
I didn't do one for my thriller, weirdly, but they helped me with my sci-fis a lot to get them just because I plants in the middle. I needed I just can't do an outline psychologically. I start breaking into hives. I did try to outline my thriller though, didn't work.
This is probably really off topic, but if you don't mind saying, did you write the whole thriller and sell it, or did you sell it on concept and synopsis? You wrote the whole thing?
I wrote the whole damn thing. But here's why. It's going to be different for every person. But for me, I was switching genres. And my agent's very good advice was prove you can execute the entire thriller first.
Okay.
Also, my agent knows I am a pantser. She knows how much I achieve in editing. That was the other reason, though, because I outlined my first act and I outlined my third act. I could not outline my second, and now I know that's okay. It worked for me. So the book actually didn't need that much editing before we went on sub, because I had to give it more structure before I started. And I did talk to an editor who said, I think you're an outliner now. And I was like, blasphemy, shut your mouth. I'm firmly in the middle, though. I have to partially outline thrillers in a way that I didn't on previous books. And I would just like to say, for the record, some people think I can't be a pantser because I wrote retellings. And I just want to say, my first 2 books that weren't published were original novels that were fully pantsed. Just saying. Okay, it is possible. Anyway, but with thrillers, I do more outlining because at the least, I have to know what happens in the third act, or I can't write the book.
I'm just curious. I know, like you said, like it really depends on the writer, like if they can sell on concept rather than like a whole thing. Because I have 2 friends that just got a second deal, and one of them sold on concept, the other one sold on a whole book. So so if it's your option, it's normal to sell on concept, but it depends on the editor. One thing about selling on proposal, however, good and bad, and this is another thing my agent knew. I think she, especially because of the college admission scandal timing, if I had a sharkier agent, I would have sold on proposal. I'm pretty sure. But it might not have been to my publisher and to my editor, and it might not have been for the same amount of money. Proposals sell for less money usually. That's what I've heard. Yeah.
Sorry, because they don't know what the final product is, so it's hard.
Right.
If you sell them a very polished book that achieves, and they see what the book is, you are in a much better position to sell. I don't think I would have gone to auction if I had sold on proposal. And I fortunately went to auction, and that helped a lot.
But at the same time, I definitely can see the advantage of just trying to do on proposal so that you don't waste so much of your time writing a book that is not going to sell.
Yeah. I want to sell the next one on proposal. It is my option, though. And I am planning on doing it as a proposal. But I've proven that I can write a thriller. So, like... Right. It's like, I can do this, but it also just so happens, although once again, I have the first act and the third act outlined. I still don't know what happens in the middle of the book, but it's fine. We're fine.
For me, it doesn't matter because I haven't sold any books yet, so I have to write a whole book.
And also, honestly, it just turned out, like, I try to imagine an alternate, this is very personal, but an alternate reality where I had sold on proposal. The thing is, if that had happened, it would have happened before I found out my mom had cancer. Which, as it happened, threw a real wrench into my writing process. So it worked out very, very good for me that I had to write the whole thing. Because instead of going on sub in the spring and ending up with a publisher deadline, I went on sub in the fall with a complete novel that I didn't have to revise until this year. It worked out. Just the timing worked out. And honestly, I was worried someone would beat me to market with a competitive college admissions book. And it didn't happen, and I was quite pleased. Other than a Delacourt novel, but it's contemporary and it's IP, so that's fine. Like IP, I'm not surprised happened, but I was worried about someone else just writing a book faster. They did it, so
Here I have a lot of times, but I don't know. I try to deal with it as best I can. I feel like someone always has the same idea as me. It's slightly different.
It's scary. And I will say I experience this a lot, and it's just not the schadenfreude. It's FOMO, or like grass is greener.
Yeah.
Some people are able to magically sell on proposal, and even I go like, how? That's not fair. And then I have to remind myself, like, trust your process.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's not publishing's not a race.
Yeah.
But I remind myself how tight their deadlines are. Then I feel better. Tight. Once they buy it, you have to write that entire book in just a few months.
My boyfriend Damien sold his book, and then all of a sudden they were like, okay, well, it's a graphic novel. And they're like, okay, well, we need he has to finish the line work by the end of this month now, and then finish all the coloring by the end of the next month. But he also has 30 pages done soon, so they can put it on like promo because it's coming out next year. And it's just out of nowhere. It's like we need all this stuff all of a sudden.
Exactly. So with IP, actually, I did consider whether I wanted to do IP. And so I did research and I talked to people who do it. And I talked to an Alloy author, like an interview, like an informational interview. And when she told me, so with IP, you do proposal first. IP sells on proposal. Package books sell on proposal. Once they buy them, your deadline is 6 to 8 weeks. And then I noped out of the idea of even doing packaged books because I was like, I can't with a full-time job, and packaged books don't have enough.
So I can't give anything away, obviously. I have a friend who writes IP for a TV, like book tie-ins to a TV show, and they decided after they'd given the person the whole outline for like the season, what's going to happen, that they decided they were going to change the last episode, and everything the person wrote had to be fixed, and he had a week to rewrite all of it.
And so like IP is just a whole other can of worms that I know your strengths and weaknesses as a writer, and it doesn't suit me. I would hyperventilate and melt down personally. I can't do that kind of deadline pressure. I also, because of the planting, you have to follow their outline because it's someone else's property.
Yeah.
No thanks.
My friend had to write it, I think it was like in 4 to 6 weeks, like you said, and then like 2 weeks later found out rewrite it all in a week. So, and you don't really have an option. It's like, what do you say? No.
It's work for hire. That's what that's what it's called for a reason. So I'm just gonna stay over here and write. I write slowly. I don't have as many books as other people, but it's cool.
Well, you have
it helps too that you have a full-time job.
I love paying my rent. Honestly,
you don't need to churn them out.
Well, plus YouTube, it's not to like talk about money, which I know is uncouth, but I mean we did on Twitter. It's like, well, honestly, especially looking at that thread, I'm like, y'all regretting having full-time jobs now? Because I'm not. It's so unpredictable. And like even like with the Ivies, as commercial as it is, I did not share how much I was paid for that, and I don't plan on doing so because I want Penguin to love me. But I'll say I got paid less than I could have gotten paid.
She got $2 million. I
got $2 million. But meaning, I'm glad that my life wasn't riding on how big that advance was. Because if it was, that would have been so stressful. So stressful. And so I just have to wait till it comes out to see how it does. And I actually have hopes of finally earning out, which is really exciting. I would love to earn out on a single book. That'd be great. I've heard royalty checks are fun. So I've never seen one.
I was glad that you did a video on that because I don't think a lot of people realize that most people don't earn out.
It's very normal.
I was about to say, I heard that royalty checks are a myth.
Right? No, that's the thing. I have a friend who shall remain nameless. When she told me what her royalty check was, she has gotten royalties, and she told me how much. I nearly fell out of my chair. I was so jealous. I was like, that is so much money. Because when you are, if you are a unicorn, like you can't predict if you break out, but if you do get paid. And it's a lovely payday. It's a dream. So,
But it's kind of like becoming a movie star, like.
Yeah, it's
just have bit parts and
you can be really talented, and it doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It can also happen once and then change. I mean, we all read that horrific article by that Heather woman about her declining advances. Playing the world's tiniest violin at a 2-book deal for $35 per book, Heather. Yeah. That's what I love about Publishing Paid Me, though. I'm like, y'all finally understand why we were so salty with that woman, that she was turning her nose up at $35 per book.
Yeah.
That's still money, last time I checked. And I do know what her sales were, and they were bad. She should have been grateful to have a career. Should still be grateful to have a career.
I think that people should always stay hopeful, because I think it was a couple of years ago, Jason Reynolds tweeted that, like, his book that had been published like 9 years before finally earned out. So it can happen long term.
It can take, the longer you stay, so frontlist sells backlist is the traditional kind of wisdom. The longer you keep publishing, the more likely it is your older titles will sell. and that they might eventually earn out.
I think
Exactly.
I think that's universal for also self-publishing.
Self-publishing as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Your
Your first book almost always will be your bestseller as well. There were some authors tweeting about that last year, where they were tweeting about which book had sold the most copies, and it was split. It was either people where it was like their debut, overwhelmingly, no question, and then a couple of outliers where it was like a second or a third book, but in almost all cases, they did a hard brand pivot and happened to break out on that book. I'm thinking of like books like Dumplin', which was not her first book, but was her breakout. But those are exceptions. It was honestly scary for me because it was like, oh, all these people saying their debut is their best-selling book. I really hope that's not me. No offense, but sci-fi is pretty dire.
Yeah. Jackie asked if you have to pay back your royalty check, but you do not.
You do not have to pay back your advance unless you are in breach of contract. And the cases where you're in breach of contract would be you don't deliver a satisfactory manuscript. That's really it, actually. Yeah.
Lindsay wants to know the benefit of selling on proposal. I would say because you don't have to write a whole book, because you could spend 2 years writing a book that doesn't ever sell.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you know that it's going to be a book. Pros and cons. Yeah.
But you do make less money. All the friends I
And
have
you
that sell on concept have made less money.
Like I've heard pretty common for selling a proposal, like you get 15K, maybe 20.
Yeah.
Pretty common.
Although I have a different friend who's a unicorn.
I know a few unicorns too.
And I'm just like, I don't want to give any personal information away, but I'm just like, I was told and I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like,
I will confess I do know some of those people, but I protect them by not sharing.
Yeah, it's just like the unicorns are like, when you are a unicorn, it's insane. It's really another level.
I don't think I could face that pressure though. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. I mean, what is it? I'm saying, oh, how horrible to be so wildly successful.
So wanted.
Yeah.
Pros and cons. It's also I'm on the side where it's easy to say anything because it's like I have an agent and publishing deal. I'll just shut up. It's fine. I'm really lucky, honestly. So.
How often do authors get paid royalty checks? I actually don't know that.
Oh god, publishing is terrible. So if you're earning royalty checks, which I'm not, but I know when royalty statements arrive. So it's the same idea. You would get your royalty check when you get your statement. You're supposed to get royalty statements twice a year. Does that happen? No. Does time exist in publishing? No. So theoretically, I should get royalty statements every like June and December-ish, but they're like 6 months behind. It's sporadic. Some houses are better at sending you royalty information and checks more on time than others. I will say, when we were considering offers, this is why you get a good agent. Seriously, my agent flat out told me one publisher was better at paying on time than the other, which i.e. royalty statements.
Time only exists for publishing when they're expecting something from you.
Yes. All the rest of the time, it's like, well,
It'll happen
working on it. It's fine. So some houses, so get a good agent and ask them, are really much better at accurate statements, on time statements. Like I will say, my royalty statements are incomprehensible from HMH.
You still get them, right? Like
I get them, but I don't get paid because I have not earned out. But I can see how much I've sold. It literally tells you how much you've earned toward your advance, and it's depressing.
I've been told they're hard to read though.
Yes, mine is impossible. Like awful. Like first of all, I have to like my agent will literally put in the subject line the royalty statement that requires a magnifying glass because the type is tiny and you got to zoom all the way in and then it's hard to decipher. That's just that particular house. I've never seen a royalty statement from another house. I will eventually, and I'm very excited. Actually, the best part about my second book deal is that there's an author portal and I'm so excited. The Penguin Random House author portal. I wanted it because I had friends with other publishers. I was like, wait, you can log into a website and see information about your book? Excuse me?
Honestly, that makes more sense. We're living in 2020.
Yes. Well, not all houses have them, but I'm very excited. So theoretically, when my book goes on sale, I should be able to see its sales week to week on the Penguin Random House author portal. And I love data and I'm very excited.
Most people
retentively check that.
Say most people on authortube love data.
I love it. No, I have so I'm very close to my agent. If that's not clear, I don't talk about it all the time, but like we text all the time. She looks at books on Bookscan for me all the time. I love numbers. I love them.
I know this is probably something I should know as someone with an agent. They get a percentage of your royalties once you start earning them, right?
15% forever, yeah.
I know they get 15% of like your advance. I just wasn't sure about. I know I should know this.
No, I didn't know
Well,
until
book,
I was
so.
like in like I didn't know until I like had. It wasn't even until I had an agent till I talked to other people who had actually been paid.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I haven't sold anything. I'm really hoping this next witch book. Although I'm like really nervous since all these witch books keep selling. I'm like, oh, they're gonna be so like overdone. Like Lizelle had to go and sell her book, and I'm just like,
Yeah, I mean the thing is just to talk about trends. I also have friends who are worried right now about everything. I'm like, look, almost nothing is sold for 2022. Like look at the deals. There's almost nothing on the slate. They have to fill their lists, and in the state of the world, they're also desperately looking for the next big moneymaker, which YA hasn't had in a while.
it's gonna be me.
I think this fall could be very interesting acquisition wise. I think it's tough money wise because of COVID, but I think they're going to be aggressively acquiring fun, escapist, intricate fantasies.
You heard it here, guys. Start writing
as well as rom-coms. Well, so my agent told me this. I was like, okay. And then Tao Lee said the same thing. I did interviews with them like 2 weeks apart. I was like, okay, if two agents say it, it's probably true. They say editors are aggressively asking for rom-coms. They want light, fun, escapist reads. So like everyone's like, fantasy isn't selling. It's selling. It's just specific types of fantasy. I think anyone who has anything that could be comped to Serpent and Dove can sell a book. That's my personal belief.
I forgot. Sorry. I forgot what I said.
Monetization. I'm kidding.
I hope you're right.
I hope I'm right too, because I have friends. I'm like, I want you to sell your book so bad, and also friends who are querying. I'm like, I want you to get an agent so bad.
I have heard those, like, I'm just curious. I'm sorry, this has gotten so off subject, but Alexa is smart about all these things. I have questions for her. Would you ever consider taking a lower advance in hopes that it would earn out quicker?
Yes, personally,
because I think I would too. Like,
I actually,
not like making as much and then them being like worried about your next book.
I had a very clear conversation with my agent, and we were on the same page. She understood when we went on sub with the Ivies, and it got interest. I said to her, and when we knew it was going to be an auction, I said, I want to be adequately paid. However, I care more about marketing plans than in advance. I want a solid marketing guarantee over money.
Because like if someone offered me like $1 million, like I would be so tempted to take it, but knowing like the chances of that earning out. Like I know $1 million. I'm just saying a random crazy.
No, it's not that crazy. I know a few people who got advances of that level, and I'm on career death watch right now for them.
That's what I'm saying.
Because I'm pretty sure they will not. Their career's over because you've probably never heard of their books, and that's bad.
That would be my fear. Is that
and they got a lot of money.
What is it called? The buy and bury is when they pay too much.
Some publishers do that. It's a tax write-off, and the first time someone told me that that is a thing that publishers do, I died inside a little bit.
I was like, I didn't know what it was this morning, and my friend said that to me.
They write it off as a loss, and I've heard specifically that there is a Big Five house that does this routinely.
I was actually thinking of one too. I'm not going to say.
You're probably thinking in the same house.
I know exactly. Like,
yes, I warn people who get offers from a specific imprint of that house.
Yes, I think we're talking about the same person.
Yeah, because they are notorious for doing so. They will buy something for $500,000 and write it off. That house
is so wild compared to everything else that they're being offered.
That house will. I've also heard this. They will buy books that are similar to other books they have in order to boost the other book and bury yours. Not to scare people, by the way, but trusting your agent's very important because they're usually pretty clever about this stuff if they're good at their job. So honestly, my agent structured our auction so that it wasn't highest bidder. She structured it so that I was able to consider marketing plans.
See, I would want to know marketing too, because I feel like you could get a way lower advance, but if their marketing's good, it could sell more.
Yeah. So, and I didn't even know that you could structure auctions differently until I actually had one. I'd never had one before. And then she explained how she was doing it. I was like, I still barely understand this, but okay, I trust you. But I was glad because ultimately I had at the end, I had 2 marketing plans, and I was able to look at the plans. And here's the thing. Publishers also lie all the time. I just want to tell you that. When you are selling to them. And so even then I kept in mind, this could be lies, but I prefer these pretty lies to these others.
Yeah.
So, because I have friends who were told they'd be lead titles and then they were not.
Yes, that's my biggest fear.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
Which I guess first I need to more worry about, like, if I ever get a deal. I will say I've been to editorial board twice and been rejected at editorial board twice. So,
yeah, I went through that as well. I feel you.
Yeah.
It's
So
a good. I know this is stupid, but it's a good sign you went to acquisitions. I know that doesn't help anyone.
I might come to you and have a lot more questions eventually.
Yeah.
Offer. Sorry if this got off subject. Does anybody have anything?
Yeah, I think though. I mean, I think it's fine because the book itself didn't have a lot for us to really. You know, I think we really kind of dove into that, and you know. Unfortunately, but I think a lot of what we talked about outside of talking about the book is helpful for thinking about thrillers and stuff. Plus, people are always here for the tea, so they always want to know the.
I know an obscene amount. It's sad.
Joey said, "Thank you for going off topic because this conversation is teaching me so much more than Jen."
Right?
Yes.
And that's the thing, like, I obviously cover some of this in, like, structured videos, but some of the stuff's way easier to talk about in a live stream format.
Yeah.
So, and it's, so, like, in the comments I see, what does an auction mean? It basically means multiple publishing houses want to buy your book, and so your agent basically, someone starts with an opening bid, and then they send it to the other houses, and they have to compete for your book, and it goes in rounds. So, like, round 1, the opening offer from this publisher is $30,000. They send it out, and then some people will drop out and other people will come back being like, well, I'll pay you $40,000. And they're basically competing for the best offer. And usually how it goes in the rounds is like, you'll get to a certain round and your agent will go back and say, like, how can you make this better? And it'll be like, well, instead of world rights, we only want world English for this amount of money. And it's like a back and forth. So
I used to think it was just people on a phone call, like all of them together screaming.
I didn't know what it was until I've watched friends go through it, and then I finally went through it, and I still barely understand it, to be perfectly honest. Just when my agent told me that they can be different, I was like, excuse me, I thought they were only one way, but I don't understand anything. Because also my friends who went through auctions, so I just like listened to what they had to say, had different, I know one went into a very competitive auction, but her agent has a very different style than mine. My agent came back to me with every round and told me what was happening. My friend just heard at the end that she had a book deal. It is different depending on the agent. Yeah, that's not my style either.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that. No, that
Whereas
would not work for me.
And I also had, prior to the auction, I had phone conversations with editors, which, like, on my first book, that never happened. I just sold in a preempt and never spoke to my editor. And it turned out she was wonderful and I loved her. But I basically was, like, interviewing editors. Yeah. I was like, oh, I feel so fancy.
You all want me.
But it was good, too, at least for me, on the Ivies, because the editor I ended up selling to wanted big changes. And it helped me emotionally prepare for what it would mean to sell to that house. So I went into my revision with Crown knowing it was a rewrite. Not like that makes it sound major. But like I said, changing my main character's perspective was a lot of work. She basically went from being a hard-ass bitch, to being a less bitchy, likable character.
The book that I'm writing right now, I actually did the exact opposite. Like, my main character was really quiet and reserved and whatever, and I totally flipped it and made her way, like, bitchier and harder and angrier. And so now I'm kind of doing the same thing where so many of the scenes can stay the same, but at the same time can't stay the same at all.
Yeah,
like,
they feel different. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I knew when I was writing and editing my book, I was like, I knew I was taking a risk with an unlikable main character. and I wasn't married to it. So that's the thing. I was willing to change it. If you're not willing to change it, you got to tell your agent, because what if you go to auction and then you sell to that publisher and then you're miserable?
Yeah.
So those conversations are important. And I also knew going in, I had to rewrite my ending. And it was very helpful to emotionally prepare for that. And then jokes on them. I love my new ending so much that you can pry it from my cold, dead hands. So, but my first reaction wasn't that. My first reaction was, I don't want to rewrite my ending. It was worth it though. I went from honestly a happy ending to a really dark ending. And if anyone actually read my first 2 books, I mean, yay. And then they read this, I'm like, get ready. Well, romances have to be happy endings. This is not a romance. So
And
I
you
went very dark.
You didn't consider, because it's a different genre, doing like a different pen name for those?
I didn't because of my platform, to be honest, because of YouTube. Also because parts of it, I didn't break out on the first 2, so it doesn't really matter. And 2, I have carried over aspects of my brand, so to speak. It's soapy as hell, and has like my other books did have murder in them, but they were primarily romances. But like it felt organic to carry over. So I personally didn't consider it. Because my books didn't make enough of a splash to ruin my name. Honestly, like
I was just curious if they would if authors are encouraged to do that, like if they are genre hopping but they're not breakouts, versus whether or not they were.
Honestly, one of my biggest strengths coming to a publisher is my YouTube channel, though.
Yeah.
So
I mean, good marketing. Good marketing.
Yeah.
I mean, my personal I'm so glad I started my YouTube channel, because it's like the only thing I could control when I couldn't control anything else in traditional publishing.
I love YouTube because I'm not good at Twitter. I'm not good at Instagram.
I'm not very good at either.
Me either.
But I also feel like I connect better with people on YouTube over Twitter.
I love the engagement, and I didn't think I would like YouTube because I don't like selfies. I still don't like selfies, and I never liked being on camera before.
Right.
I've just had to train myself. Like getting used to seeing myself is so strange, and sometimes I hate it, but it turns out I love the feeling of engagement, but it's controlled engagement, meaning I can still edit and say what I want to say.
Yes.
But I love the comments. I love when we do chats. Like I feel like I can be a version of myself that feels organic and true and have impact, because honestly, selfishly, I love giving advice and no one was reading my blog. So and I'm not popular on Twitter, so threading on there never worked.
I'm not
really
as clever.
Hard. Some people are so clever. I'm like, I'm not that clever.
That is exactly why I can't.
I'm not that funny.
It's yelling into the void on Twitter. 100%. You have to be really clever, or no one's interested in what you have to say.
But I've tried to convince other TradPub people to come to YouTube. Almost no one listens to me, and I'm like, guys, it's like you're making friends. Like it's hard to explain. YouTube engagement is weird.
And I'll tell you this because you and I are closer in age, Alexa. It's because most of these people that are our age did not grow up with YouTube. They don't understand it as a platform. They don't.
And they don't watch it. I can tell when people don't watch YouTube.
Yes. I can't tell you how many people that are my age that I'm friends with from, college and high school and stuff, who do not understand at all what I do on YouTube. They don't get that it's a thing. They don't watch. They don't understand that people do this. They still think of YouTube as a place where you go to get answers for stuff or to have things explained.
Which it is, but it's evolved.
Yes.
So it's like that. But it's like, it's where you go for friends. I really am convinced that I should be friends with Raw Beauty Christie. Me too.
Me too.
Like, I love her. We would get along.
I would be best friends, yes.
Recently, I fell down the true crime hole. I love Eleanor Neal, who just talks about murders. I'm like, tell me more. I feel like I know people, and I know it's the same thing for people who watch our channels. And I'm like, it's a weird, surreal feeling, but I understand it.
Yeah.
And there's engagement, there's interaction, but also specifically with TradPub, there's so much people don't talk about. I was like, why?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just transparency. Like
I think there will be more traditionally published people on YouTube as younger people start getting published. I think the people that are like, you know, in their 30s and their 40s, that's just a medium that they're just not familiar with. They don't understand it. They don't consume it. So they're not going to produce it.
Well, and I've seen so many times people are like, you know, because I'm one of the few, and that's why, like, when Lizelle joined, I was like, yes, thank you, and I boost her whenever I can. I boost the trad pub channels as much as I can, like, because it's like, they're like, well, why doesn't, and they'll name some author who's very famous and has written a ton of books. Like, they have the experience to really give advice. I'm like, yeah, but they're really famous. They don't need to make a YouTube channel. They don't want to make a YouTube channel, and they don't have the bandwidth to give you all this information for free. Like, you're going to get it from younger, less experienced authors who are going through it, because that is something that is very Gen Z, very millennial. And it's not like, you're just not going to see, like, Sarah, I'm sorry, like, Sarah J. Maas doesn't need to make YouTube videos. Like, that's one example I can think of. Like, honestly, they're all blessed that Brandon Sanderson takes the time. Like, be grateful. But it's not our style of YouTube channel. He just films his lectures because that's organic to him. But that's not, there's another author who I won't name. I've been salty when people have called that person an author tuber, because I'm like, are they? Because they're really not making consistent I shouldn't. But point is, I don't consider them an author tuber. I consider them an author who once posted some videos. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, that's very different.
It's different. And if you don't engage in the
community,
are you really part of the community?
Yeah.
So,
well, I am. Yeah.
I'm feeling
about that.
I have a lot of feelings about that too, but that's
for an offline conversation.
Exactly. But yeah, I definitely think that part of it is like an age issue of just like not understanding. Because I try to tell so many people, like, you should do that on YouTube, like, even if it's not all like writing related, and they're like, what are you talking about? So
Lizelle, like, yes, but I love that Angie streams The Sims.
Yeah,
like, I love that.
I love watching people.
That's funny. Yeah, I saw that she started a channel. I hadn't seen that she'd posted anything.
Yeah.
That is funny.
I also watch SimsTube. There are simmers that I really like and want to be friends with as well. Plumbella, I feel like we could hang. It's the whole thing.
I actually love Trixie Mattel sometimes will stream Sims, and I just love it. I love watching people play Sims. I don't know why.
Also, just if anyone wants other obscure YouTube, if you just want to know what I watch on YouTube, I recently fell into soap making YouTube. There's a specific YouTuber named Royalty Soaps, and she's just this she's just like sassy and Texan, and I just love watching her videos. I'm like, oh, what are we making today? And I also fell into roller coaster enthusiast YouTube during quarantine, and I know things about roller coasters now. Yes, Lil Simsy. I love Lil Simsy. I feel like Lil Simsy is too young. Like, I feel like more like a mom to Lil Simsy, because she's literally a baby. Plumbella isn't much older, but I still feel like we could get a beer or cider. So yeah, sometimes I feel like a YouTube mom, and I'm not that old, so I don't think I am.
I feel the same.
Maybe if I had kids, it'd be different. And gosh, people I went to high school with literally have 20-year-olds now, and I'm like, all right, not 20-year-olds, but they're like 18. I'm like, I can't handle this.
Yeah, I think we're like the same age, because like the same thing. I don't have kids, so it's so hard for me to conceptualize that I could have a teenager.
It's
like
weird.
So that's like, so in the book that I'm writing, the parents, when I finally realized that her parents could be my husband and I was like, okay, then I'm going to make them like the kind of parent that I would be. So the parent, it's weird though to think that like, I'm not putting myself into the MC. I'm putting myself into the MC's parent.
I have like it. So in my thriller I was writing, I was like, oh, I am the police detective. She's my generation. And I actually had like a snarky line about her. And my editor was like, is that really true? And I was like, she's my age. I trust you. She does not know about competitive college admissions. So yes, my teenage character can snark at her about it because she's my age. And trust me, it wasn't the same when she applied to college. I know. Because I'm old as hell. So
so it's weird to think. Yikes.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, I think we talked about all the things today. So
We did.
Hopefully, I enjoyed it. I thought it went a lot better because we didn't talk too much about any of the
Crap
terrible
book.
stuff.
Let's just do chats sometime that aren't about crap.
I love that.
We should for sure.
Because I don't live stream enough on my channel. I'm terrible at it, to be honest. So
yeah, we do it every week. I always feel bad because we do it every week, like for like sprinting, but we do way more talking than we do sprinting. It's more just like wanting to talk to people, and on occasion we'll take a little break from talking to write a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, so but yeah, I like being able to have these chats, especially when we are talking about publishing stuff, because like you said, it's a little bit more organic to just explain yourself and say what you're saying, or talk about YouTube in general, rather than having to do like a form to like sort of exactly.
That's because a live show is you pantsing a conversation rather than a structure of a regular video.
Definitely. Yeah. And I feel like when you're live streaming, you're able to be a little bit more of yourself, you know, you're not like on like teaching something. So,
sometimes dangerously. There's been the occasional live stream where I'm like, did I really just say that?
Yeah.
Hopefully not in this one. There's been some on my channel where I'm like, oh God, I really just spilled that tea. It's fine. We're fine. I get a little too free.
Yeah, that for sure. But I do that sometimes in my videos too, and I have to edit it out. When I'm editing my videos, I'm like, oh, don't leave that in there.
There's even though I outline a couple of my videos about like certain publishing things, I'll be like, oh no, don't say that.
Yeah.
You can't say that, even if it's true. Too salty. There are also entire videos. They're like, now everyone here will know. I filmed a video on YouTube, authortube, and like scams that will never see the light of day. I edited it too, and I just shelved it. And I made an outline that I've been editing for months, and I just have failed to film because I'm so scared of making the salty video of my dreams about scams because I'm worried anyway. But I wanted to make one, and I've just talked myself out of it multiple times, and I filmed an entire one and just didn't post it.
I think a lot of stuff hit the cutting room floor that'll never see the light of day.
Yeah, and I think that might be another hesitation that some people have about YouTube is they don't want to put anything out there into the atmosphere they can't take back.
You do have to be careful. Like, I run a lot of videos by Lainey, and she's always like, if you have any doubts, just cut that out. I'm like, well, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Doubt is a sign.
Yeah.
But because it's just like, you can't take it back, but also just personally me, and I know we need to wrap up. I'm a horrible talker. Because I am traditionally published, I feel like there's like an onus on me to be as professional as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because YouTube might feel like the Wild Wild West, and then sometimes it is, some ways it is, but it's still like public projection of yourself and what you want to say. So I it's also why there's certain things that I don't speak to, and I've gotten into fights with, like, I got into a fight with someone in my comments a few weeks ago. They were trying to slag off another authortuber. I was like, no, I'm deleting your comments. Like, I don't like that on my channel. They're like, then you're condoning them. I'm like, I don't care what your beef is with another person. I am not hosting your vendetta against another person on my channel.
Like, I'll be honest, I've been very tempted. But no, I make it a rule that I don't talk about other people, because
it's not my place.
It's just not. It's not a good look. To be doing that, and I also don't think, who the hell am I? You know, who the hell am I to put my and it feels bullying to me, honestly. Yeah. And if I don't like a person, I think everything is wrong about them, I'm not going to post a video about them. That's horrible.
Yeah, I feel that I have an inordinate amount of power because I have an agent and I have publishing deals, and like I have to be aware of that. I never want to punch down ever. And even just the idea of it being punching down is fraught because I don't like to think of it that way. But it's just not cool. I'm not going to go after someone who. Anyway, I digress. I try to be hyper aware of my position and how power dynamics work.
Oh yeah, and I think too, similar, like even like me wanting to enter traditional publishing, I'm very weary of. Like, that's why I stopped doing like fiction book clubs, because even though I wasn't saying anything bad about books, I didn't even want to host a space where people were bashing people that could be my, like, you know, people that are publishing right now in the field. I'm like, ugh.
I'm not perfect, but I try to be careful. I still am aware that I can mess up because I have been reviewing books. But like, I feel safe giving this a 1 star. This book was garbage, and James Frey can't hurt me.
Right.
But like, it is true. There are certain things I won't say about certain books because it's just not cool. But also, I don't want to hurt that person.
Right.
In some cases, I do know the authors personally. I'm like, oh, that's awkward.
Yeah. I feel like when I read stuff, if I don't like it, I just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And same thing. And I expect the same thing. I don't expect any of them to like my stuff, and like we can just like not talk about it. It's great.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we should probably wrap it up.
It's dinner time over. It's dinner time over in North Carolina.
It is dinner time.
It's lunchtime for me.
Yeah, same.
I miss California, you guys.
It's great. No lie.
I mean, I love it. Don't love the rent, but I love it.
Well, we actually were in the process of moving back at the end of January, beginning of February. And then we were supposed to be moving like around March, and then COVID happened and some work stuff happened with my husband and a bunch. So now we're stuck here for a little bit longer. So someday I'll be back in LA.
Oh,
someday,
it is nice.
Yeah. We lived there for almost 8 years, and we moved back because my husband's parents are older, but we convinced them to shuck their way out to the West Coast so that we could be closer to them. I know. We never thought that was going to happen. But,
life is so good here. It's expensive, but it's good.
I would say, yeah, the rent.
Rent, I mean, money is the thing. And I'm like, could I quit my job if I lived somewhere else? Yeah. Do I want to?
Somewhere else.
No. Because like the sun, I don't even like sunshine, but I do.
Same, girl.
Like I do miss rain.
I do miss rain. I actually miss the fall.
Miss it if you go. God, it rains so much. Cause I live at the beach. You know, we live here on the ocean, so it rains every day. I live between the swamp and the ocean, so
I know where that is. I used to find homes for exchange students in North Carolina.
Yeah, so I live in Wilmington, so there's university here. Yeah, about an hour. Yeah, of course. Yeah, so. It's raining all the time here. It's horrible. The mosquitoes are horrible. It's awful. When I lived in California, I was like, oh God, the sun is so oppressive. It never goes away. And then I'm here and I'm like, I miss the sun. Where is it?
I just miss the fall. Like I miss like fall.
I miss fall seasons.
Yeah, but I will say when I look out, like where my desk is at, I can look up and I see palm trees. So that's cool.
Oh, I miss that.
I see apartments, but beyond that, I see the blue sky.
I see the other one in my complex, and then above that is a palm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, someday I'll be back there in SoCal with you guys. But until then, it's dinner time here in North Carolina. So.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us, Alexa. This was a lot of fun, even if our choice was unfortunate.
Yeah, that's 100% my fault. I literally suggested this. So.
But now we know, and we've warned everyone, if you want to write a thriller, just watch Alexa's videos on how to write them. Don't bother with this book.
It is wrong that there's so few resources out there, to be honest. Like, why? How? All the thriller writers are keeping their secrets so that only they can write thrillers.
I'm convinced that's what it is.
Yeah. That might honestly, it's a pretty competitive market. So wouldn't put it past authors. So, no.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us in the comments as well, or in the chat or whatever. And
don't forget to thumbs up.
Yeah, and if you're not already, for some reason, following Alexa, or Kevin, they are linked down in the description.
We'll follow Alexa. She has
follow everyone.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you later. Oh, wait, I got to end this, don't I? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, everyone. I always forget that.
And it's going to ask you how it was.
Yeah.